This is going to be a great one. I literally was, didn't hit the start button. In my mind, I didn't hit the start button. It was crazy. I was having the whole conversation with myself with the points of the lecture for the night's class in my head just now, like having the whole conversation. And then I looked and like, oh, it's 8 o'clock. Maybe we should start. Maybe we should hit the live button. The point of the traumatic experience, the events, the things that happen in our lives as we lean to fill up. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The points of the emotional experience, the differences between emotional intellect, emotional intelligence, understanding emotional dumping. These are all parts of the clauses and the points inside of your soul contract. Good evening, good evening, good evening. The points inside of your soul contract. The one thing that I learned, and I've learned with myself, was a lot of my healing was stunted. What's up, what's up, what's up? A lot of my healing was stunted due to the fact that I was trying to seek it from a space of annulment. I was trying to annul it like it never happened. I was trying to go through spaces like shit never happened, never dealing with it. And then when it came to a point to me to face it, I immediately tried to divorce it or divorce from it and put the fault within my identity that I created ultimately to maintain my momentum in that space, staying detached. Remember, everything down here, you remember, opening this up with, you are a business, you are a brand. You are a business, you are a brand. You are a corporation. You are a set of numbers. You are a set of numbers. You are a set of codes that are all used to put you together that created your body of work that is you. That's what you are. So the best way to understand everything being a byproduct, being an emotion, the things that we invest into, and then breaking it down in that simple manner with ourselves of, damn, I really do that. Everything from how you eat to how you move is all based in the aspects of your emotions, what you're willing to invest in. The more that we go through a state of avoidance with ourselves, that's what we're going to be getting into tonight. Emotional dumping, the emotional intellect, and the emotional intelligence. Three main keys to your three keys that are going into the aspects of your contract. How you move, how you act, why you moving the way you move. The things based on behaviors. Your emotional dumping grounds. What have you emotionally, the different examples of how you've emotionally dumped and what emotional dumping truly manifests as in your physical sense based on your emotional intellect, the level of your emotions. You're always looking for something. You always want that's what you're naturally doing inside of this space. But I wanted to start with a story. And we're going to get into tonight. What's up? Greetings, greetings, greetings. She's here, she's here. We're going to be getting into as we've been getting into throughout the week, we've been getting into the emotional aspects, being somebody's piece, and terms and conditions, learning how to break away from conditions. In the state of separation, there still needs to be assessment. It does me no good to separate from motherfuckers if I'm not assessing how that shit came into my space anyway. all of these trigger points that trigger trigger the emotional intellect. Use something as simple as the story I wanted to say. I remember going back to my childhood in this life. We never had a car. Every time my mother would bring up a car, we should get a car, my pops would always say the same exact thing. It was like, so we gonna live in the car? Because the way the money's set up, we got the money for all this right here. The car is not like, there was layers to it. And I'm gonna get through these. I'm gonna break down some of these layers. My mother would always go to this defensive aspect. And this is when I was first learning the layers of emotional manipulation. It was like, you don't want me to do this, but then you don't want to get us a car. I don't understand. And then I remember my pops would always go to the conversation with like, I didn't say we couldn't get a car. I'm just saying the way that we have things set up now, if we get a car, then we are basically going to be living inside of the car. Do you have an idea of how to get a car? Where to get the car? How are we going? Like, that's what my pops was always in the aspect of the mind of the planning. Going deeper into it, it was also for my pops, unconsciously to him, whether it was unconscious or consciously or not, in a narcissistic tone or not, I had to get past that point. It was always based in a sense of control. Both of them were trying to fight for control within inside of the space because they had things that they did not yet balance with inside of themselves. And everything outside of them was based in, these were the first examples of me seeing emotional dumping grounds. That emotional dumping. The emotional dumping that created the space that I came through. The emotional dumping that created the space that my brother then came through. My twin sisters came through. My greetings. My sister came through. My little sisters came through, and my sister came through. It was all based in this emotional dumping complex. If something was not given into that space, something had to be created to sustain that space. This when Bobby was talking about that rearing phase, and like after that rearing phase, they're really not related to you, only based upon the events that happen inside of that space. So if I don't learn these aspects or emotional intellect, this is how emotional intellect comes into play. A lot of the things that I was doing earlier on, based on trauma bonding, deflecting, not dealing with learning my emotions or getting into emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, understanding myself to that level. A lot of the things that I was going into, it was just creating more and more emotional dumping grounds, being that my job was an emotional dumping ground. It served the purpose to investing in, to me trying to prove something into my certain space. So if I get this job and I prove to my pops, okay, cool, I can get a place, I can get a car, I can do all of these things. Now I have to look at the space and how I'm creating it. You're creating your space in real time based on experience and observation. The experience and observation. Until I accept the experiences, not just acknowledge that the experience happened, this is the way that I am, but until I accept that the experience and that bottom line, the first line of your contract, the experiences that I'm going through that I acknowledge are the aspects that I must accept based in the contract that I wrote up for me to go through so I can now learn these lessons so I can master myself. I wasn't doing that earlier on. A lot of us weren't doing that shit early on. You were just predestination, staying within that comfort zone. And remember, I've broken down like your comfort zone is simply the space in where you know how to react. Your comfort zone is simply a space that you know how to react at. Comfort ain't got nothing to do with feeling good or feeling bad. It got everything to do with that positive and the negative. You stuck in that duality. As long as I can react to the shit, I can stay within my comfort zone. As long as I can look at, it's one thing to look at somebody and be like, damn, they got some shit they got to go through. They got some shit they need to deal with. They got some inner demons they got to deal with. But it's a whole nother switch to accept the assessing of myself to be like, you know what? Wait. Why are they in my space then? How does that correspond to me? They clearly have, this is where we're breaking the glass ceiling of emotional intellect. The glass ceiling of emotional intellect is simply, you know, the definition. I know what love, I know the definition of love. I know the definition of hate. I know the definition of it. I know the definitions. But how does that, but it being in my space, if I'm of everything, I must remove myself from the dynamic of seeing myself as being a part of something from this perception with myself. I'm not a part of that. You're of it. That's why you can see it. That's why your senses are active towards it. Whether it irritates the shit out of you or makes you feel some type of way, you are a part of it. You are a corresponding collective aspect of that energy inside of that space. That's what you're learning about yourself. It's not just saying, okay, cool, I want to be in peace. I know the definition of peace, because now everything that you're going to be doing, you're going to be emotionally dumping shit off in your life, creating these emotional dump sites. And then what comes out of that emotional dump site? Most of us were created through an emotional dump site. Your parents were in love or in the state of survival. So the next thing that they created was something based on that survival. That's how you got here. That's how your contract came together. And then going through that space where you're like, man, but I didn't do that. But yeah, it happened. And now you're just trying to create these more. Now we go into this state with ourselves based on our emotional intellect that we have. We don't have emotional intelligence. You just know that this causes that, the basics. You hear it's on the basics. I know if I do this, then I'll get this result. So I'm just going to continue doing this and getting this result. But what happens when that result's no longer enough? What happens when that result no longer feeds you? Yeah, that this cause and effect. What happens when that result no longer feeds you? Until I understand, it's not about the effects that happen to me. That's the acknowledgement. This happened because of this. I acknowledge the effect. We got to acknowledge, you have to accept the cause. And accepting that cause is not going to be based on telling the story from the hurt or from the biased or getting to a point of comfort so you can still react. It's one thing for you to say that your mother was narcissistic. It's one thing to say that. To say that your pops was narcissistic or your pops was whatever he was, your mom's, whoever hurt you, all these things that happen in your life. It's one thing to get the intellectual definition of what they were. But you have to see how that, you have now to intelligence, you're a genius, you simply wanting to know, you have to remove the conditions. You got to remove that predestination, the pre-existing conditions in order for you to even tap into that. To be able to see that point. I'm breaking it down now. Your emotional intelligence, I talked about it last week. Your emotional intelligence is within vulnerability. It's within your vulnerability. You have to remove the judgments. Judgment is based on emotional intellect. Your emotional intellect will leave you stuck in that realm of that judgment. So I'll give you an example. If I have a conversation with somebody, if I have a conversation with a homeboy of mine, and now I'm stuck in this space because I know what I know about the emotions. I know about the emotions. I know the definition of love. I know the definition of emotional manipulation. I know these definitions. She said she joined the party. I know these definitions. So now when I go into a space, that state of judgment is the state of judgment keeps me in a state of avoidance or a state of neglect, or why I'm being neglected, why I'm not getting what I believe that I need to receive from the external narrative. So now every time that I go into a space, what do you lead with? I don't open up and share my emotions with people, because every time I share my emotions, I get hurt. That's the image that you put into your mind. That's that judgment. Now everything because you're now looking, remember, you're looking through a fucking filter. That wound is a filter. That emotional wound, that neglect wound, that rejection, that first rejection, those rejections that you face, all of those create that aspect of that wound. So now you're looking at everything through a filter. So somebody can tell you something. This when we go into, you get upset when, like, you looking at somebody that's not fitting of what you believe in your predeception of what something should be in this perfected state to give you some information or tell you some shit. No matter what, you got to remove all the preconceptions. For example, I had a conversation with my chosen elder. She called me her brother because I remind her of her brother. She is an elder to me. Respect to her. Like, she is actually the reason we're connected on that level is because she's my hold on, wait 1 second. When you're going into that space, which I'm gonna read your question in a second. When I'm going into that space, she represents my Gemini North node. That's where I'm going into. That's what I've come into. That's my mental state. That's how I'm navigating now, as opposed to being in my Sagittarius South node, which is based in the convictions that keep me in constriction. So anything that comes into my space is based on a constriction. It's on my Gemini South node. It teaches me that, and I go into that space. But let me read this question real quick. What does it mean if a person is no longer affected by the situation beyond the cause? Give me an example. Because that can be one of many reasons in that aptitude. Going in, you have to go past the point of that comfort to where you're no longer, you can go into a space literally by the causes of what happened to you. Oh, okay. Going to the examples of where you're at within inside of your space, the conversation is now changing because your original causes and your original effects. The original cause is now, you're now stating, now you're in this space. Remember how we talked about last week, bringing your causes or your shadows, i.e. your identities, the shadow, the original cause, the shadow, everything that was created to sustain that shadow in your past, bringing it to the current state. Bringing that to your current state. You can't do anything. You can't do anything. You can, but it's all going to be in the necessity. Think about it. Trying to prove yourself to people. I want to prove I can be your peace. No, you can't. I can be your happiness. No, you can't. I can be the love of your life. No, you can't. I'm already the love of my life. I'm already the happiness of my life. I'm already the peace within my life. The only thing another entity or another energy can teach you or show you are the aspects to take you outside of your comfort zone, to make you really question what you thought was peace, to make you really question what you thought was love, to make you really question what you thought was happiness. That's why you can go into a space based on your emotional. A lot of times when we stuck inside of that trauma bond, you sitting out there, you just keep creating emotional dump sites. Most of your friendships that are based on the trauma bond, the traumatic experience, sisterhood, the brotherhoods that you created based upon that deflection. They're emotional dump. You just created a space where you can emotionally dump the biases and live through the biases of the emotional intelligence. Women don't understand, da da da. Women don't understand men, and da 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 da. Men don't understand women, do. Do you realize that's what the fuck you came down here to understand? In your past life, you could have very much well been in the masculine position. So now you came through the cycle, and now you coming down here to learn the feminine aspect of the position. Let me give you a little secret about you got your boy, you hang out with your boys, you play games with your boys, basketball, all this shit with your homeboys, drink with your boys. Do you know you're sharing intimate moments with them? The only way that those moments could exist is based on the level of intimacy. It's intimate. You're sharing intimate moments with them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that space of neutrality, that's that tightrope that you're assessing. The longer that the difference between peace and neutrality, that realm of neutrality, that neutrality is a tightrope based upon judgments and your biases and assessing those. Assessing what you created within your space. The space of peace, that's the space of no condition. You're within flow. You're within flow. You're not going through fluxes with your emotions. You're in that. This is tapping into that emotional intelligence. In your peace, you learn you're in that state of vulnerability with yourself. You're in a state of openness with yourself. You're not living based on conditions. Your desire, you now can assess your desires, because we're gonna get deep into that tonight as well. Your desires, and if your desires are based on the lower or the higher aspects of yourself, just like your needs and wants, everything that you assess in this space over here in the land of neutrality, I'm gonna stay distant. I found something that worked, so I'm gonna keep doing it. If it doesn't work, or if I'm not getting something from it, then maybe it's time for me to move forward. What were you looking from it? In the land of neutrality, before you get into this realm of peace where you ain't looking for shit anymore, you're in the space, you're not creating emotional dump sites for yourself, so you can keep avoiding certain aspects, so you can stay within that comfort zone, so you can stay reacting the way you need to react. That's comfort. As long as I can react to it, I'm in comfort. It's the aha moment. It's the oh shit moment. It's the simplest answer. It's the shit that forces me to sit the fuck down with myself. That's what I'm looking for. That's what you need. That's what you're going to be looking for. You're not looking. You keep trying to seek. I'm trying to seek happiness. It's within yourself. You got to learn the happiness within inside of yourself. You got to assess what you made, what blockages you created, or what lines you created, or what clauses you created inside of your contract in order to unlock that energy within the energy within inside of yourself. The reason that I could navigate and I can see, it took the in-depth aspect is because that realm, or that realm where that energy comes through, I've been in that space. It's not about the physical and what it comes out in the physical aspects. It's about how it comes out in the emotional aspect, or the magnetic aspect, the magnetic or the magic, how it comes through that space. So now when I look at things through that on a grander ass fucking scale, because it's based on the depth within inside of yourself. So if you tightrope in between this and trying to make that decision rather than this decision, if I go do this, then this is going to happen. Is that something that you need to happen? Maybe it's something that needs to happen. If I go this way, then this is going to happen. Motherfuckers going to be mad at me. People going to think about me this way. Where is that coming from? Why does that bother you? Why does what people are thinking about you inside of that space, why does it really bother you? Mm-hmm. Very much. Yeah. Uh-huh. In that land of neutrality, everything is just what it is. There's no moving forward past it. There's no moving forward. There's no in that realm of neutrality, there's literally that's purgatory. Before you step through the gateway of death, you go into that realm of purgatory. You go into that first layer, that first void. You go into the first space that is the observation of all of your experiences at that level, that space that you are in. Everything that, okay, shit. Now it's time for me to really look at this shit. We got to that point of purgatory in that collective sense because no one came out. There's like no one can explain to you what death looks like or what the other side looked like, because if you really supposed to go there, you ain't gonna come back. It's whatever you built over there. It's gonna look like whatever you want. It's gonna look like whatever is necessary for you to learn that shit, to assess these things. But if you keep wanting a certain result and you're not getting that result in that space, guess what? You can't. I cannot get the result inside of a space that I've not went past inside of myself. If I've not dealt with that to a certain level, then I have to allow the experiences to come into my space or into my space on my wavelength for me to actually start learning what the fuck I need to learn next. Because if I'm not, I'm just gonna be sitting there like, man, but what about but what about this and what about this? If it's not, it is one thing that I had to learn. One thing one of the greatest factors that you're going to learn. If it does not expand me, or it does not put me in a position mentally to where I'm learning something, I'm becoming more vulnerable, I'm becoming more open into my truth, I'm becoming tapping into my potential, I'm inside of the realm of my perspective is changing, I'm in that space of my purpose, it's forcing me into the state of uncomfortableness, then it's not for me. It's not something that I need to be. It's something that I can be aware of. That don't mean I'm gonna throw it out. It's just something that it's not. It's on to the next one. The things that connect us to those aspects is that fear, is that rejection. That's what gets you caught up. Your rejection wound, the emotional wounds that you're carrying. Those what get you caught up in the timeline, in the timeline. Remember, your emotions are the catalyst of time. Your behaviors cement those aspects in time and create those patterns and those habits. So you just live the whole life based on habits and patterns and behaviors that was subjectable for you to stay within a certain range of energy, to use a certain range of energy. So as you open up into that space, you're like, damn, nigga, my energy's changing. I feel like I got a lot. I've told people this before. I tell the first awakening for yourself when you feeling all good and you out there, ooh, I got some crystals and I meditated a couple of times. I got a couple new books and a couple of things to that nature. That's like the trial period. The equivalent of that little AOL disc or that little trial period that you get. That trial period that you get with yourself, like, ooh, I got me a little trial period. Because after that trial period, now you like, why is everything going to shit? Why are my family and friends why are my family? Why are my friends? Why are my relationships getting weird? Why is all this happening? Because now you're in the chaos. That little trial period That was all the energy that you built up to that point. All that energy, all the traumatic events created that little slit in the womb that you're now about to go back into. You're going into that death. You got to go through that rebirth. You can't avoid going through the rebirth. You can't avoid, man, I don't want to go into there, man. It's scary. What's scary about it? Everything's in there is something that you created. Everything that you have in there is based on the creation of the sum of all of your emotions anyway. Going back to the story with my mother, I remember so many stories of that narrative. I remember the first time my first car, I remember getting my first car. My first car was I forgot the year, but it was a minivan. My first car was a minivan. I remember how we went to go get it through some underhanded tax shit. I remember my pops took me and I came back down here. I had money on me and I was like, my pops asked me a whole question like, where you get all that money from? That's neither here nor there for you to nigga know, to understand, nigga. But I got the money. I had money to put on the car and all that other shit. So many other things came up into that space to where it was based on, I was learning the basis of control. That's how my first identity was created. So now everything that I saw within my childhood of that space that was learning based in control. So when I thought about love, I thought about control. So I thought about love, I thought about ownership. Like a lot of us were taught based in survival, we never were taught love. We were taught based in survival. So we were taught based in ownership because a lot of us came from those roots of that ownership. So a lot of times you go into these spaces and now you're like, if you love me, then this will happen. If you love me, then this will happen. And we say these things to that narrative to remain within the narrative of the survival. So if you love me, then you'll do this. That means you don't love me. And then the definition that we created based on the emotional intellect of what love is, based on the conditions that we set. So you're supposed to love me forever. Because remember, there's two levels to it. There's the ego-based love, and then there's the love of your higher self. This is about full acceptance, no conditions. This one over here is based on expectancy and conditions. And the level of acceptance is only based on the level of control of the condition. I love you. Yes, the expectations you got to drop. I have no expectations. I have a standard. I have a standard based on my love. I have a standard based on my energy. My standard is based on the merits to myself. I got to give it to your standard is based on what you give to yourself first. My standards are not based on an external narrative. Therefore, it cannot be affected by the external narrative. My purpose is outside of the external narrative. So everything that I do based in the desire is I had to check my desires. I'm going to get into that before we get to that. I had to drop those expectations. Those expectations created the conditions. Those conditions created the necessities. Those necessities fed my behaviors. It fed my habits. It fed my patterns. It fed my emotional intellect. So I was stuck in my emotional intellect. So if something did not live up to the standard or the expectation, I would go find something that I would go create another emotional dumping site in order for me to live into that space. Some of the times you got to really think about it. You really got to look at what you created in your world, up to the point. Because a lot of the things that you created are based on you emotionally dumping. Because you knew you didn't want that, but to make that decision was horrendous to your humanity. If I say no, if I do this, if I say no, if I say something, then they're going to reject me. If I say something, they're not going to accept me. If they say something, I'm acknowledging my neglect. I should have thought you weren't thinking. You were moving in the sense of the emotion. You were moving with that flow of that emotion. But until I understand the current of my emotions that brought me into that space or created that realm or created that experience or that new observation or the effect, then I have to keep that going. This is when we look at the aspects of, we talk about sex, we talk about the sexual traumas are the same as the emotional traumas, the mental, physical abuses. They all go into that same tandem aspect, and they all create those different realms. Each one has a different trigger point. One triggers the emotional dumping. Another one which one is it hitting first? That's the question that you ask yourself. Somebody emotionally dumped it. When we think about the aspects of the sexual predator, they dumped into your emotions. They did an emotional dumping into your emotions to make you stay within that emotional state. Until you assess that trauma or that event, you're always going to be dumping through that same event. You only can create up to a certain point. And that's because you're being fractured, the mind being fractured, the psyche being fractured. You're trying to refill that space with something that makes that okay. You're trying to annul like the event didn't happen, and now all you can do is create those identities and place the fault on the identity. Going to the example of, I try to be everything for a man, or I was trying to be everything for her, and the shit didn't work. I was trying to be the best nigga that she ever had. I was talking to all these things, going down these lines with her, but it never even worked. Where did you learn that from? Where is that stemming from? What was your first example of that? What are you trying to prove? Are you trying to prove to yourself, as it builds into this example, are you still trying to prove that when your mom left your dad, or for whatever reason they broke up or split up, and now you're trying to prove that if I do things of this nature, you're trying to alter, literally, you're trying to alter the past, or alter your shadows, or alter the old aspects of the memories. That's the necessity of your current state. So everything in your current state is meant to prove that if I can do it now, I can prove to this person or this entity or that energy, like, hey, if you did this, this, and this like I'm doing, then they never would have left. Mom never would have left. Dad never would have left. If you did this, this, and this, then dad would have still been around, or dad wouldn't have got mad, or dad wouldn't have hit you. You're still trying to fix. You're still trying to fix the past. You're still trying to negate what happened. You're trying to seek the annulment. So when it doesn't work in your present state, now you in a constant state of divorce. I'm fuck these niggas, fuck these bitches, niggas ain't shit. So now everything that you search for is in a necessity to keep you within that space. So now everything that you listen to, even when someone can give you full information based on your level of light, based on your level of darkness that you have assessed, that's the level of light that you can take in. That's how you keep the shit balanced. That's why if somebody tells you some shit, you don't hear nothing till they say no. If they say anything other than the answer that you've given yourself to maintain that identity, that's when you'll get upset. This is what I heard. That's all you heard? But this is also what I said. Because I was listening to reply. A lot of those events, especially coming into this Aquarius moon is going to be the aspect of the deceptive aspects of your shadow, the things that you disassociated with. So now it's going to be this time of point that you're going to have to listen to others' aspects because it's valid in their identity. But going past the point of reaction, I got to look at people and their point is valid based on their identity. In order for me to now assess where I'm about to go or how this energy is about to flow into this space, this is when we've all seen that meme. Before you have a conversation with somebody, make sure that you understand that they on the level to comprehend it. And you see the other meme where a motherfucker be like, make sure that, every time that you have a conversation with somebody, you are opting in to feed their emotional catalyst. But if I only have my emotional intellect on the table, I'm gonna have an expectation automatically when I go in there. If they don't understand it, or if they do understand it. If I'm right or if I'm wrong. I'm looking to be right. I'm looking for the rights. I'm looking for the wrongs. I'm going through the point of I'm trying to be right or I'm trying to be wrong, or I'm trying to make them see it my way. There's no making them see it your way. They only can see based to the level of light that they have within inside the level of light which they have purged into themselves. They still got conditions on the table. That's you sitting at that table writing up a contract right there. Are you going to accept those terms and conditions? Is that something that you need? Because yes, you might need to accept some of them terms and conditions. Because it just depends on where you at. This is you being honest with yourself. That's the experience that you have to go through. It's not about avoiding it. It's about being able to assess and learn from it. Every space that you go into. Why do I think that when I get to this point, this should happen? And if this hadn't happened by this point, then that means something's wrong with them, or something's wrong with me, or they don't really love me, they don't really like me, or whatever it is. Because remember, you only can come to us based on your level of experience, is based on your level of observation. Based on your level of experience, your level of observation. So now you sitting in that space mad at the motherfucker because they said, all right, cool, I want to do this. Next, okay, you want to do that? All right, cool. It's going to take this, this, and this, whatever it may be. You're not used to structure, you're used to survival. A lot of us are used to structure. A lot of us are used to the structure of survival. The structure, I was so guilty of that shit. The structure of survival will always have you looking for something to be instantaneous. The structure of survival will always leave you in a state of trying to make things instantaneous. That's the ultimate aspect of control. That false aspect of choice. That conversation that you keep having that's based on the conditions of the conditions. Look, you can go do whatever the fuck you want. All right, cool. And now you look at, I can't believe you went and did that, even though I said don't do it. You said go do whatever the fuck I want. If you didn't mean it, why did you say it? I wanted to see what you were going to do. I wanted to see if you loved me. What? What? Emotional intellect? You don't have emotional intelligence? That's not emotionally mature at all. Same thing that you do with, same thing you try to do when you was running around and you looked at your dad and had control over all the money in the house and your mom couldn't go places, or your maternal figure, he had all the girlfriends and they all came to him for money and shit. What's the sense of control? I have no expectations. My standard is based on what I do and what I have to do, what the things that are necessary for me to function and grow within my space. My desires, once I assessed my needs and my wants, greetings. Once I looked at my old needs and my wants and saw how they were stuck within the physical and the material, every one of my needs and wants were based on emotionally dumping. It was based on an emotional dump site. I created an emotional dump site. So if I got that car, this is what we understand is material in the physical plane. When I got that car, the only reason that I put so much energy into the car was because I was still trying to live out acceptance based at a certain level of my shadow of myself. So my car became a necessity. Therefore, since it is a projection, everything that led up to that moment, I would forget. So I forgot what it was like to walk. I forgot what it was like to need a ride. I would be forgetting what it was like to, I'd be forgetting what it looked like to walk. I was forgetting what it looked like to need a ride. I was forgetting all types of other shit. So guess what else I forgot to do? I forgot basic maintenance of the car. I'm just riding in the projection. I'm riding on my emotions. As long as motherfuckers is hating on me, I'm good. But I'm forgetting certain aspects. So when that decline of that projection or the light that was used to sustain that projection started to decline, I had to fill that space up with more things that were antagonists. So now I had to ask myself, yo, was it Shorty? Was it me attracting Shorty into my space, or was it the identity that was attracting Shorty into the space? I could deflect all fucking day and be like, see, bitches don't know nothing. Bitches only want to be around me because of my fucking car. Me having a conversation with my shadow self years later. Yeah, nigga. That's exactly what it was. Niggas wanted to be around me just because I had the place. I had my own place, and they could come over from the, yes, nigga. That was the exact reason. But why did you create the space in the first place? They needed you needed them to survive just as much as they needed you to survive. You built your space off of survival. You built your whole existence based in the survival. So all of the expectations became the salary caps. So anything that comes in your space that don't fit a certain thing and you're ready to disengage from it with that emotional intellect that you have, the definition of love, the definition of whatever the fuck it is, that's what you're going to get triggered first. Oh, you don't want to do this. That means you don't do this, this, and this. Even though emotional intelligence, that's acceptance. Emotional intelligence is accepting that the trigger is being triggered and doing the work. Looking at it through the spectrum of like, damn, even though they said it in a way that I'm not used to, it's not based on what they're saying, it's the energy and the way that it's being presented to you. Shorty told you, got mad at you and said your dick was little. Homeboy told you that you suck at giving head and you got upset because of what he told you. That nigga has an emotional intellect. He knew how to shoot at you and you knew how to shoot right back at him. Both of y'all want to go in the position of being right. That emotional intelligence will force you into that state of that transparency. It'll force you to look at it like, instead of deflecting and you yelling out, my last man liked it, you had a whole line of motherfuckers that liked it because they were scared that they would never get it before. Because it suppressed your urge. It suppressed that urge. If I could use this urge based on my needs and wants where I'm at, it's gonna make me okay. I'm okay. That means I'm doing okay. I can stay within comfort. I can still react. not as much as control, not as much as controlling, but being able to assess, reflect, and become aware of our emotions. Emotional intelligence is the state of being aware, being within awareness of our emotions, the flow of our emotions, the aptitude of our emotions, the awareness of understanding what's coming into our space, allowing ourselves to reflect. That's emotional intelligence. That would be like the best definition to explain emotional intelligence. Emotional intellect is the ability to adhere or be, it's being aware, but not being self-aware. That means I know the definition of whatever it is that I'm trying to acquire. Mm-hmm. Yes. Action and assessment. Emotional intelligence is action and assessment. You can tell when you're stuck in a state of emotional intellect because it lacks action. It lacks action. It requires reaction. You being in an emotional, put it like, give you a killer example. You go on the news. Not so much as the desensitization of the stimuli. It's becoming aware of the emotional stimuli. Emotional intellect would be more. Emotional intellect is more of the desensitizing of the emotion. That means I know what love is. I think I know what love is. I'm not worthy of love because I've never seen love. So I'm going to detach or desensitize myself from ever needing love ever again. Fuck it. I'm going to go without love. Emotional intelligence is being able to, for me to look at what was stimulating my love based on the survival narrative. Once you're aware of it, once you're aware of it, now you're going into the state of, once I'm aware of this aspect of this emotional trigger. So let's use an emotional trigger for example. Let's use an emotional trigger as an example. Once I'm aware of my guilt wound, it maximizes it. But once I look, like use the example of my guilt wound. Let's say I have my guilt wound. If I have my guilt wound, I must now that I'm aware that I've been acting through guilt. That means if somebody says something to me and when I know I should say yes instead of saying no, or I know I should say no instead of saying yes, or if somebody says something based in the high sense, they tell me an emotional story. Oh my God, my house is being I'm getting kicked out my house and I need a place to stay, and I have the information of why they got kicked out of their house and all of these aspects. I'm not trying to see myself in that space so I can stay within that guilt. So now that's my guilt wound has been exposed. Now that I'm aware of my guilt wound, now I have to take the actions to learning how to assess my guilt wound, how to work myself work through the experiences that are based upon guilt. So now when things come into my space that are used to feed my guilt wounds, whether it be the homegirl or the homeboy or the friend, the sister, the family member, always getting locked up. They always getting locked up for some shit. Everybody gets together, makes a fist fry, GoFundMe account and bullshit to go get them out of jail, then they back into jail. My guilt would make me, your guilt makes you a part of that because they all feel guilty. Mom, remember, I've talked about it before. Your mom guilty because of what she did that led to that point to that person, won't admit it. Exactly. Your mom, remember the mother of the child that keeps going to jail, she has a guilt. She has guilt that's feeding into that space based on the things that she did. The father, he has guilt that feeds that space. That one conversation when your brother or sister in this example came to you and told you some shit and you told your parents about it because you didn't feel right about holding it. You now feeling that guilt into that space. All of y'all got guilt going into that space, feeding that guilt. The key is for me to become aware of this and accepting yeah, I said something. I went and told my parents, or I went and told my people about this, and this about this person. And ever since then, I felt guilty by their reaction. They reacted to me. They got upset with me. I got to look at it as I now got to be, as I'm becoming more self-aware, the only reason that they're doing that is because of the same reason that I'm doing it. They're deflecting and I'm deflecting. So now the next time I go look at an event like that, oh my God, somebody done got shot on TV or a nigga done went to jail. Man, the cops ain't shit and all that shit. That shit don't faze me because I'm in a higher perspective. I want to know if I'm not getting all the information, I'm not going to move off of the emotional aspect. I'm not going to move off of my guilt wound. I'm not going to try to, I can't be seen in the control of, that can be your sister. That could have been your brother. That could have been your uncle. That could have been this. I'm not trying to see myself in that. I'm not trying to consciously see myself into that space just to soothe my wound. See, now I feel less guilty because I helped somebody else out. When are you going to help yourself out? It's time to look looking at it from that higher perspective. So now when I see things that would make people guilty or make people triggered, even when I'm in that space, now it's based on that assessment. No problem. Now I'm based on that level of assessment. I'm bringing myself to a level of assessment. I don't feel guilt at all. I don't feel guilt for shit. I don't feel guilt. I don't feel doubt in certain aspects. Not saying that it's still not being worked on. You're not saying it from a point of like, I don't feel guilt. Nigga, yeah, you do. Because who are you trying to convince when you yelling this shit out loud? I don't care. I don't care about these niggas. Niggas don't like me because I ain't got no filter. Let me tell you something about that filter that you got on saying that you don't care. That's a fucking filter. That's an identity. There's a difference between me not giving a fuck from the most highest aptitudes of understanding and not giving a fuck because it's going to affect how my identities, it affects how my identity's looked at. It affects how I feed that behavior. Because you got niggas out here that don't give a fuck. But it's that's an identity that they maintain. You don't give a fuck. So you want to be seen not giving a fuck. Papa Lucifer truly doesn't give a shit. But I have the ultimate, I'm grown into the ultimate compassion. I say that from the space of compassion. So when I tell somebody that and it triggers them, see, nigga, you don't give a fuck about anything. You don't give a fuck about anything. You don't give a fuck about people. And I didn't say I didn't care. I didn't say that I'm past caring. I have compassion. Shadow be like, yes, you. But like, nigga, we don't care. We have compassion. And you said that I've had that conversation. I'm like, nigga, we really don't care. We have compassion and understanding. Ain't that the same thing? No, it isn't, Carlos. Caring is being stuck within a bias point. Oh, yeah, I remember when we said that. Compassion is the ability to remove the bias, the ability to listen, the ability to ask for the whole story. Your identity is stuck within emotional intellect. Your identity is based upon emotional intellect. And your intelligence is based upon the integration of your shadow, the integration with yourself with your shadow. My emotional intelligence is my ability to be able to have that. I just remember this conversation we just had. I have a conversation with little Carlos. Exactly. Whenever you study, whenever we looked at, whenever we're looking at everything that you're looking at, the spirits, the deities, these are different principles of yourself that you have to understand. Break it down into your natal chart in all of your signs. These are different principles. These are principles that are a part of you that you are learning to go through. It's not about me sitting there being like, oh, I'm a fucking Aquarius, so I'm disassociated from everybody. Fuck everybody. I have to learn through my Scorpio rising, which is the water, to not disassociate with the emotional learning. So now I get to learn emotion. Instead of me having the emotional intellect and being said, like, okay, I understand emotions, because I did that earlier on in my life. I understand the emotion, but then the results would be inside of my space playing in my lab, playing in the laboratory. I get in a relationship just because. It's July, summertime. It's summertime. I'm not going to be going on these trips by myself. Boil that shit all the way down to be accepting of myself, to see how disgusting I was with myself. Oh, it's summertime. Let me finish telling that story. It's summertime. I guess I'll be in a relationship right now. I'll open the doors to the relationships. Now I'm in a relationship during the summertime. The person in the relationship was only like a byproduct or a fill-in, so I didn't feel weird going to places by myself. I'm not going to go out and eat by myself. I'll look like I'm crazy. People going to look at me like I'm weird. People going to look at me like I'm lonely as shit, lonely as hell. I'm only saying I'm only saying the true aspects about myself. I already was lonely. So of course the world is going to view me as lonely. Niggas. So I'm like, all right, shorty, come on with me. Now I got this person in my space. It's the best day of their life, the best week of their life. To me, it's just another fucking Tuesday. It was the best weekend that they've ever had of their life. To me, it was just another fucking Friday. The reason that I could keep doing it is because that identity based on disassociation was necessary. So exactly inside of that space, what I needed them to do, if I needed them to fuck up, I needed them to fuck up. I needed them to say some dumb shit. I was looking for every reason in the book for them to say something for me to, yeah, I can't deal with you. Yeah. Ooh, you got attached. Baby girl, this is just the thing. I wasn't dealing with my emotions. I wasn't dealing with my shit. So of course, if I'm in a space, I'm not dealing with my shit, and they start telling me about their shit, how do I look at it at first? Nigga, that my bitch was crazy. No. Carlos, they were telling you everything about yourself. They were giving you corresponding features about yourself. Why did their acute, now that I understand it, why did because now you're asking the question, this is how you initiate your emotional intelligence. You got a chick that got daddy issues. You keep meeting chicks with daddy issues. How does that correspond with you inside of your life? I had dad issues. I was trying to, the correspondence to these chicks having daddy issues based on neglect, it fed my need to stay inside of that space based on acceptance to give them everything that my pops didn't give my mother. So in every relationship came to that same damn line of events. It didn't matter what chick came into the space. They fed that wound, or they fed a corresponding wound that was going on with inside of myself. So instead of me saying, why the fuck bitches keep doing this? Because it's easy to be like, bitches out here ain't shit. Women, niggas ain't out here ain't shit. But how does this correspond to me? How does this reflect me in my way? How do I assess this aspect? What is this going to teach me? I'm not looking for anything anymore, because if I'm not doing that, that's when you got those conditions in there. That's why you got 90 million fucking songs talking about crazy bitches got the best fucking pussy, and niggas that ain't got no job got the best dick. That's why you got all that shit out there, because you wanted to experience that aspect in your life. Why is that so true? Because the nigga ain't got nothing else to do. It's easy for me to be like, well, the nigga that sit around the house all day, so of course he got the good energy. Here's how I'm going to describe this. On an imaginary staircase, climbing up the steps, the identity, intellect, to go down to the other side, integrating with the shadow itself is better. Yes. Yes. Yes, exactly. When we started cleaning up our emotional mess within our internal conflicts, shit starts to really change inside of your space. But here's the key factor about it. When I started assessing my internal conflicts, that fear aspect or your ego trying to stay in play, that comfort, now the reactions start happening. Now you sitting there like, now that conversations, now the hour and a half long conversations that you used to have with your homegirl about men problems and niggas not being shit, that conversation goes from being an hour to about 15 minutes to about no minutes. And now you got to assess why the conversation keep getting shorter. It's because you're not feeling it with the same emotional, you don't connect to the emotional conflict, you're dealing with it. So now your conversation comes from a certain point. Here's another point that happens. You got to understand that shit down here has been created based on cycles and cycles and cycles of you coming down in this shit. So there's things down here that are literally stuck. They can't do shit else. They have one purpose: deflect, distract. No matter what you seem to want to do, it's always going to do the same shit over and over again. You got to assess it. But that also goes into assessment. If I've dealt with all of the aspects of this individual or of this place or of this business, we'll say of this business, that means using to the equivalent, if I no longer have to go to the mall because I now know I can go get the clothes from where they go get the clothes, so I can bypass the mall. What is the purpose of the mall? If I deal with my internal conflicts, that means niggas ain't all that shit, ain't shit and all that. Yeah. If I deal with my emotional conflicts, that means I go seek counseling. I sit my ass down and I go seek counseling. I start going into spaces where it's going to be, I'm going into events to where I no longer can react. And I dealt with, so I go into a space between my mom, my mom, and my brother, or me, my mom, and my sisters. My brother still holds on to some shit that I've dealt with. Acceptance and separation and all those. I've dealt with those aspects. I went through the rooting. I went through the clearing. What is that? What is he now? He's no longer he's still is my brother in that energetic aspect of the learning aspect. But he's only related to me based upon the traumatic events. If I'm dealing with the events, they're not willing to deal with the events. I've created examples for the events. All I can do is allow that natural separation to come into play. It's going to be a natural separation. And the only thing that can fill that space is either going to be them projecting or me laying out the line for the example. That's my assessment. So now as this space is created, this whole space is assessment. That whole bridge has been burnt down in one aspect, but it was based on assessment. So now the only way that they can come across that bridge, you're going to see them start projecting more. You're going to see people start projecting more. Projecting their fears. Oh, you don't want to do that because of this, this, and this. That ain't what I said. Yes. Your energy is going to do the work. Your energy is either going to pull something towards you or push it away. Your energy is going to do one or two things. Either bring it into your space or push it out of your space. That's what your energy is going to do. If I'm in a negative state of my energy inside of a space based in survival, that means my negatives serve my purpose, then everything has to come into my space that attracts me to keep me within that negative aspect. Yeah, to keep me within that negative aspect with myself. Now I got to stay negative. Now I got to stay reacting to this, and the third in order for me to maintain this identity. See, that's why I don't be loving these hoes. And that's why I don't be loving these niggas, because they be doing all this extra shit. The extra shit is the lesson that you need to learn. That's the result of you being in the space. If you don't trust and you don't love and you don't trust and believe in motherfuckers, then you need motherfuckers. Then everybody around, everything in your space got to maintain that frequency for you to stay there. Now you in comfort. Even though you in that, and then you can go back and forth and be like, oh man, we living in hell down here. My hell is beautiful. My heaven is beautiful. My heaven and my hells, they're just as beautiful. They mirror each other. My hell is where my demons my hell is where all of my demons make the moves that need to be moved to keep us where we need to be at, to keep me reigning in my space. I'm not attached to shit. I got my to do that for me. My heaven and hell are in perfect harmony. They're in balance. I'm not sitting there like, oh my God, but what do you need? You got to get to that point. It's different between you saying you don't need and don't want anything, but you ain't looking at your desires. Because if you say you don't need and want anything, what do you desire? What are your desires? What are your values? Are your values based on the lower aspects or the higher aspects? What do you desire? What is the desire based on your authenticity of yourself? Earlier on in lectures, I would always say this line. Earlier lectures, I will always say the same thing. I will always say, fuck them kids. I will always say, fuck them kids. Because if I'm saying fuck them kids, that state of purgatory, that's you assessing your needs and your wants. Remember, in purgatory, the void, the abyss, whenever you read the stories about the abyss, the void, purgatory, the only things that are in there are things that you have not dealt with. The only things that are in there are the things that you have not dealt with. Whatever you take Star Wars, whenever you go, what's in there? Whatever you take in there. Beowulf, whatever you take in there. Whatever you take into, whatever you have not dealt with is what you're going to have to deal with in order to go forward. You keep bringing that shit to the crossroads. You bring that shit to the crossroads you want to. Lower aspect gonna trick your ass based on comfort. I can give you 7 more years of this shit. All right, cool. Based on your level, what your condition. Yeah. You sitting down here living in a loop of your own. You're living in a loop of your hell of your own damn design. You design that for yourself. The more you don't accept your guilt, the more you got to live under your guilt. The more you don't accept that you are neglecting yourself, the more that you say everybody else is neglecting you, guess what? Everybody around you got to keep you in that state of neglecting. You'll even go to the point to keep yourself in a state of neglect, just to stay in that survival mode of that identity that you love so much. You got so used to, I remember being so used to do everything. So it was an imbalance. I was so used to being able to do everything that I thought that I wanted, but I was only doing what I could. But in the reality of it, I was like, in order for me to do everything that I perceived that I wanted, it avoided me taking away from the things that I needed. So the only time that I would do it was based on what it would look like, what it does, what it did. As long as you're not assessing your traumas, as long as you leaving that shit you're always going to be in a hell loop. Basically, you're always going to be stuck in that hell loop. Something's always going to make you react. Something's always going to make you upset. Here's the reality to it. Something's always going to make you react. But once you started doing that assessment and that reflection, those old reactions don't really hit you no more. The things that used to make you react, with the audacity of these white people for doing this, and this. The audacity of them niggas. All you're doing is accepting that you need something from that space. The audacity of my job firing me after paying me for even the hours when I was sitting on the toilet hidden in the bathroom. The audacity of my job. It's not the job fault that you didn't have enough money. You didn't have the emotional intelligence, i.e., so then you didn't have financial intelligence. So even when the money came into your space, you didn't know what to do with it. The money was based on hope. You got the money based on hope. But since you never saw it go past a certain point, you want to stay within the comfort zone. So you keep doing shit. Yeah, exactly. Or you just keep doing shit based on to stay within that comfort zone of their identity. So you got the same, you get the same chicks to come around you so you can react the same exact way. You got the same niggas staying around you so you can stay the same exact way. Hell, you get in a relationship with a motherfucker that's truly emotionally intelligent and you're not ready for emotional intelligence, nigga, it's your level up. So now everything that you were trying to use before don't work up here. It don't work in that level. I'm horny. Do you know what horniness is? Do you know what you in the mood is? You being sparked and it being horny and feeling frisky is? From the higher aspect, it means you trying to tap into some higher energy. It means you're assessing a level of yourself. But since we got so used to emotionally dumping, you got horny, you get horny, you feeling some type of way. Ooh, I'm gonna go release this energy into this space so I can remain inside of this space. That's why when you switch over, I'm celibate. That don't mean shit. Why? If you take it away, what are you assessing? If you remove that from your space, what are you assessing? What are you learning about yourself? You should not be celibate for 4 years and your only answer is because niggas ain't shit and bitches is manipulative. If that's your same answer, that if you went into the void that is being celibate as this example, you went into the void with that thought and you went into your darkness, that's supposed to challenge your perception. That's supposed to learn, you're supposed to learn your potential and your purpose inside of that space. So if you come out 5 years later, niggas still ain't shit, I'm going back in, you didn't learn anything. You're just in a state of avoidance. You're in that state of that neglect. You're in a state of rejection. You You just created another identity to lessen the blow of rejection. Let's get into these emotional dump sites. The emotional dumping that you've been going through in your entire life. Or the physical manifestations that you keep bringing into your life. Even when you're manifesting things, why are you manifesting them? What is its purpose? Is its purpose going to bring you into constriction, or is it helping you expand? Everything you manifest at a certain point in time should be based in expansion. Why are you trying to manifest to save some shit? Your manifestation is based on expansion. Your manifestations are based on expanding you, challenging you, because that's how this whole cycle works. You ask for something, okay, it's time for me to level. I want to level up. I want to get better in this point in my life. I want to get better. I want to be able to evolve. I want to be able to change. I want to grow. Guess what got to come up first? Everything will come into your space based on the negative wavelength that you're on in order for you to be repelled to your positive. So you said you wanted to change your spending habits. You wanted to change your spending habits. So now your homegirl, you and your homegirls always go, or you and your homeboys always go around the same time every year on this vacation that y'all want to go on. Or y'all plan a vacation around this time of the year. Now you sitting there, now that guilt wound starts to show up. That rejection wound starts to show up. Because now you got to sit there in that space and be honest with yourself, like, I just said a couple of weeks ago, I want to change my spending habits. This may be the test I need. Do I really need to go on this trip? Why do I need to go on this trip? Do I really need to go? What is the purpose? Do I really need to go on this trip? It's not about avoiding. It's about really, really learning it with yourself. What happened the last trip? The last time you went on that trip, the same homegirl that went on the trip with you last time didn't have no money, and all y'all had to break bread with them. What did you learn from that? I'm going to go. You might say, hey, I'm not going because they're going. I'm not breaking bread for anybody else. That might be the very thing you need to say within that space to that experiment. I'm not paying for everybody else. I stacked up all my money for this vacation. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for everybody else. Man, that's fucked up, man. You know she ain't got no money. She never has no money. The only reason she's able to go is because we all feel some type of way to make her go. I always feel guilty, so I want her to go because she always in the last relationship with her man, and she did that same shit last year. That nigga never have no money to go nowhere. Now it's time for me to assess. So that 3 G's that 3 G's that I would use on that trip, now that money's in my space. Here's that key. Here's that key based on your manifestation, your intention. Now I got this 3,000 sitting in front of me. What do I need to take care of? That's that purgatory point. Because now you got that 3 G's sitting in your account and it look real nice. But you still got an urge you got to deal with. That urge to go somewhere, that urge to that urge to go run somewhere, that urge to go get something off. Now it's time to assess. What can I do that is going to better me, since I said I wanted to better myself? I wanted to work on myself. What have I been putting off? That's the step a lot of us end up fucking up with. I remember fucking up that step a lot of times, a lot of them damn times, because just because I didn't go there didn't mean I couldn't still go over there. Until I learned, I was like, wait, I got that 3 bands in the account right now. I still want to go by a body of water. I still can go to the lake. I still can go by a body of water. I ain't got to go. I ain't got to stay. I can go drive there and drive back. I might spend a little bit in gas, might grab some food and some snacks on the way. I might ride out and do it that way. What did I just learn? I learned to be to myself. I learned a moment of reflection, and I learned some new shit about myself on the way. I opened up an entirely different space. Yeah, do a nice little drive-by. You ain't gotta, when you feel the, I gotta go. I sat by the lake for 4 hours. Just sat out there chilling by a lake. They all hit me up. And then this is what happens while you inside of that space, as that example. Now I'm sitting there in that space. Everything that could have happened, would have happened. Every possible perspective or every perception or every point that could have happened at that trip didn't happen at that trip. They telling me that, yo, old boy got drunk. They telling me all this shit. And I'm like, I'm sitting with myself and I'm like, really looking and assessing, like, that ain't even really fun to me anymore. The only reason I was going into that space, based on me running, based on me avoiding, was because everything in that space would give me an example or a perspective of running. So now if I keep going over to my homeboy house or my homegirl house, and there's always going to be an argument or something always going to happen, I'm always going to have examples in that space that are showing me avoidance, that feed my avoidance wound, that feed my neglect, that just feed me. I got to learn how to give it to myself first. Now it's time for that separation. So now I can look at my contract. Now I'm looking at my contract more. That's what that meant by family in my natal chart, in my house of family. That's what that meant. That's what it meant by the things I'll have to deal with based on family. That's what it meant by my number being based in harmony. Me being a 4, me being a destiny number of 2. That's what it meant by those numbers. That's how those shits lined up. So now I can more efficiently manifest. Because if I did that in that one period in time, and it's a period of time, but it's emotional catalyst, where I was used to run. Now I didn't run, now I started facing some shit. When that cycles back around, that space is now different based on my new perception. So the way that I look at it is different. So now I can assess if it's really a need or a want, or if it's something that I desire. Now I can go back and look at it like, ooh, I went on vacation by my damn self. You went on vacation without us? Yes, I did. I went to the beach. I got me a nice, I went to the beach. I went and got me the nice little penthouse joint, had my little cabana on that bitch, and I was out there and I was chilling to myself. You didn't invite nobody. You had a whole suite to yourself? Yes, I did have a whole suite to myself. I beautiful space for me. Yes, I did. I'm good. Man, I wish I would have went with you, man, because like, my girl tripping, that wasn't the type of energy I needed inside of that space. I didn't go into that space. That's the reason that you weren't invited. You telling them that's the reason they're not invited. In reality, it just didn't attract you to that space. They've always had that issue. And when I assessed how I had that same issue, I could have that conversation differently. Now I have a conversation with them, no conditions, no expectancy, based on me being truth and understandable about the space. Whether they want to accept it or not, that shuts that space off. That no longer has access to me. It don't change the overall aptitude of what they did and what they did for me. And they were there for me back in 98 and 2000. It was cool. It was nice. Great. You were there for me. I appreciate, remember, we always go back to that apology. Thanks. I thank you for what you did. I thank you. But at this point in time, I'm over here now. The more that you start doing this, that is the level, that is the graduation from an emotional dump site. You'll be like, yay, I'm not emotionally dumping anymore. Another example of emotional dumping based on traumatic aspects of relationships. When we go into the aspects of relationships, you ain't never, if you always been based in your trauma, yeah, they'll fight back in your reality based on projections. But it's all in how now, but so now that we now in that space, now that I've learned to assess the situation, I'm not trying to look at it from a deflective or a defensive point. I'm in observational offense with myself. I'm in the state of observation. Now those aspects that used to come into my space, they still can come into my space until I know that there's residual thoughts still in my mind about it. Like, just because I acknowledge my guilt and I accept my guilt and I apologize for being guilty to my inner child, to my inner shadows, and I bring them into the present. Now is the level of me doing this process of assessing the identity and the aspects that were in my life based on that. So everything that was based on like using an example of one of my acceptance wounds, always trying to be accepted. I created multiple streams of identities from that one shadow to create all these identities based on being accepted. So in this space, I talk this way. In this space, I wore my hair that way. In this space, I dressed like this. In this space, I was whatever they wanted in a sexual sense. Whatever was in this space, I had all these different identities. You're okay. You can't stop the flow. You can't stop the flow of the train of thought. All this shit written in my head is downloaded and used at the same time. So I'm looking at my space in these spaces when I'm looking at myself, and I'm like, that was an emotional dump site. The way that I use relationships was as an emotional dump site. The way that I went over to my homeboy house or my homegirl's house, those were emotional dump sites. Because just like going to the club, those were my emotional dump sites. I would go in there, and there's nothing wrong with the site. But once I assess it, now I don't need it. It's not a primary. It's not primary. It's not primary. So the same way that I used to use the club, I used to use friends' houses, the way I used to use the bars and use all of these places in real time. This is how, when you grow up, when you growing into yourself, now I'm sitting there like, you know what? The train of thought would change. Like, think about it like this. Why am I going to go to the club, go to the bar to go pay $7, $8, $10 for premium drinks when I can go get the whole bottle and have it at my house? Play the music that I want to play and chill out the way that I want to chill. If I invite people into my space, I control the door. I control when the fuck they leave. I control when they come in. How does that relate into my aspect of me understanding how I used to the emotional dumping? Now I control what's being dumped into my space. Because it's one thing for you to be out there dumping and everything. It's another thing you also got to control how you dump it, what you allow to be dumped into your space. There's two sides to that guilt. There's two sides to that avoidance. There's two sides to that neglect. Your side and their side. Or whatever conduiter is meant to be on the other side to keep that charge. So now you're sitting there looking at yourself like, oh, damn, I did used to do that shit a lot over there. You blaming it on everything else but you. I was drunk. I didn't know. I remember one time we were sitting there in a conversation and we were sitting there having a conversation about that very time. Like, nigga, you can't get, nigga, no. What? That don't even make sense. And it never made sense to me. I was like, nigga, I drank more than y'all. I remember everything that happened that night. What do you mean you don't remember? Oh, you use it as a what's that word? You use it as an activation point for you to be able to do it or say just keep doing what you're doing. Oh, that's what you're using it for. You use it as a conduit of distraction. Oh. Use it as a conduit of your neglect. That's what you keep using. That's what your urges are. That's what your addictions are. You're using that as the catalyst between you dealing with it and you not dealing with it. That's why when motherfuckers get upset and they always getting out drunk and shit, and motherfuckers either get extremely happy or extremely sad, that shit was already there. That shit just balanced them into that space. Remember, when you first start working with spirits and you say, oh, I pour libations to the spirits, okay, and then you take some shots with them, you're already there. But you got to remove it from your system first. Like, I had to remove drinking from my system and smoking from my system. There was a whole bunch of things that I had to remove from my system in order for me to reintroduce them to my system and use them in the aptitude of what I needed to use them for, and not as a device based on avoidance. Every time I was stressed out, I go take a shot or I go smoke. Every time I'm feeling some type of way, I would use this to go, well, it's because of this, this, and this. What? Now I look back at myself and like, why did I do that? Because that was the conduit that made people accept me. If me staying in comfort, remember the reactions that's based within comfort. So if I could take that sip and blame it on the alcohol and they reacted like, yeah, he was drinking, or yeah, we were drinking. Now I'm still in my comfort zone. But when it came to the motherfucker looking at me like, nigga, that's not an excuse. You get drunk like that all the time, or you drink like that all the time. Now it triggered me. Now Shorty triggers me. I'm like, oh shit. Damn, like I didn't think it was that much of an issue. Like everybody, not like that. Think about everybody that you're around that be doing that. What do they do with their lives? Getting triggered even more. Like, God damn, bitch, why is you attacking my friends? I don't like none of your, and then when it would come through them based on where they were at, I don't like none of your friends. Bitch, my friends was here before you, they're gonna be here after you. I'm sounding like a bitter person. I'm sounding like a bitter bitch. The true realities of myself were coming to the surface. I wasn't ready to deal with them. I'm sounding like the equivalent. Back then, I was sounding like the equivalent to the bitter bitches and the bitter niggas and the niggas that are mad and all the bitter people that are mad right now with like Kevin Samuels and all these motherfuckers triggering their ass, triggering these human aspects of themselves. Making you want to go write this hour-long paragraph for what? I sound like one of them. Damn, I sound like one of the bitter bitches. I sound like one of the bitter niggas. I sound like the motherfuckers that I was always talking about. All right, cool. You keep talking about them. I guess we gonna universe, higher self say, okay, cool. You keep talking about them. We gonna make you just like them. No, I'm not. Watch. Here's your example. Here's your experience. Now you sitting there like, my fucking word. I did not know I was doing that. Yes, nigga, that's what you was doing. Trying to hold on to that damn identity. I'm real, nigga. I don't be out here da-da-da-da-da and doing all. What are you trying to hold on to? You've done it at a point in time. You didn't do it the way that they did it, but you did it in a definition that served a purpose for you. You did it before. You've been there. That's why you can react to it, because you've been there before. I can't react to what I've not been there. I cannot react to something that I've not done, or I haven't been there before. That's the level when I go into spaces, even then when I go into spaces and I'm mad fucking quiet, going into a space, don't say shit. I'm like, oh, I'm surveying the energy in the space before I'll be looking at the people and setting up conditions. Like I might go stand over there with them and I might go stand over there. That's what I was looking at. Uh-huh. Oh, damn, that's what that is. Oh. Now when I go into a space that I'm looking at based on energy, if I immediately feel my chest get tight and I'm listening to myself more, my chest would always get tight when I would go into those spaces. My back would always start to hurt, or my headache would start to pound when I went into those spaces. But there was something inside of that space that can keep me attached to live inside of that space, so I can exist there. Oh, they got music? Okay, cool. I'll listen to music the entire time. Oh, they got drinks? I'll drink the entire time. Oh, they got a pool table? I always gave myself a reason to be there. I always gave myself a reason to be in that space. Oh, it's my homegirl party, or it's my homeboy party, and they just came to my birthday party, so I got to return the favor. Nigga, I'm not going into a space if there's individuals inside of that space that I've not yet assessed with myself based on that level of that energy. That means if I have to bow out, I'm going to bow out and not go. Get that nigga a gift. Give that nigga his gift early. Take that nigga to lunch. Take that nigga to dinner somewhere later on. Pay for that nigga haircut. I'm out. Nigga, holla at me later on in the week. Sis, holla at me later on outside of the week. Because that space over there ain't. They feel some type of way, man. You can't be letting these. You know what they're about. I'm not about that. I really look deep into myself, and I know I'm not about that type of energy. I'm not about that type of life. I don't do that. You want to be cool with everybody and all that good shit? Cool. But I'm letting you know now that is going to be the separation of us. It ain't about me. It's about the energy inside of that space. I've told that to many motherfuckers, like just breaking down that to people, being honest, not in a state of condition to over-explain. So I didn't have any conditions. I just said what I needed to say inside of the space. Cool, calm, collected. Even if I got a little bit heated a little bit, or I felt some type of way, I knew it was something that was being shut off. I had to allow that shit to happen. Not understanding why motherfuckers not understanding why niggas couldn't save money, or why motherfuckers couldn't save or do certain things. I had to look at those things and look at how it reflected in with me. The only way I can react to it is if it's something that's a part of me. So the same way motherfuckers not being able to save money, save their bread up for trips and shit, and all of that narrative, it came right into the same narrative with me of me not knowing how to budget my life to where I wouldn't need to, me not knowing how to budget or understand my emotions in order for me not to have to go run away the same time every fucking year. I had to you really got to do that assessment. Or you going to keep bringing that shit? That's the attraction that comes into your space. And then everything in your space keeps you within that identity. Everything that makes you mad, upset, it's all there for that purpose of you dealing with it, you sitting with it, not trying to make another emotional dump point. All right, cool. I can't do that over here. It's too full. I'm going to go over here and start dumping over here. So now you spend 8 hours, we being extreme, you spend 8 to 9 hours at your homegirl house or your home, somebody's house to absorb energy. You don't even know you're sitting in the space absorbing the same energy, and then you got to go feed it. So now you got to look at how you fucking eat all the goddamn, how do you eat? All of that shit goes into question, not just the things that you think are in a complex sense. It's a bunch, it's not nothing complex. It's a bunch of simple things that come together that make this complex weave that you trying to assess. You trying to assess it based on you're trying to look at the whole goddamn thing and missing the point. That whole stream is a whole stream of all of your emotions. That's your argument. That's your fight. That's your disagreement. Because one thing didn't go right in this whole damn sequence of events. Now you feeling some type of way. Maybe I need to assess my sequence of events. Why do I get to this point, then it shorts out? That's why I tell you to be fucking gentle with yourself. Understanding yourself is going to take that work. It's going to take you stepping outside of that comfort zone with yourself. That way you ain't sitting there every goddamn day getting mad because you went 7 steps ahead and you had to go 10 steps back. You needed them 10 steps back to learn some shit. Stop getting mad because you had to go 10 steps back. Man, every time I move forward, something keep pulling me back. I always get knocked back 10 steps further than I was before. You're showing that you're in the past. You're in the past somewhere. What you're doing is feeding one of those points of necessity based on that shadow that you're not going to go deal with. You didn't move forward. You didn't created a whole damn family, and you got a whole family unit. But then all of a sudden, your moms come up out of nowhere, sister, brother, somebody come out of nowhere with their own problems. And now you in a space where you're actually building something, but now these things are coming up into your space, and you like, why does it keep popping up? Why? Because it's reminding you that you're anchored to something behind you. Your brother that always seemed to get in trouble with the law, he's letting you know that you locked up somewhere in your past. That's why that shit keep coming up. That family member, they keep coming up for some strange reason. Ain't no coincidence. Ain't no damn coincidence. Remember, there's no such thing as coincidences. Infinite probabilities within the infinite possibilities that are you. Why did you choose that route? Not what's not the outcome. Why did you choose that route? I thought that was the route to me getting a house. Okay, cool. What's on that route? I thought that was the route to me getting my car. Okay, cool. What's on that route? I thought that was the route to me finding peace. Okay, cool. What's on your route to your peace? Everything that you're doing has a plan and a point and a perspective that you have to assess with yourself. Me breaking it down into this level, like this is how my mind works. This is how my mind works all of the time. But it took a lot of groundwork and going through a lot of shit and understanding those traumas and those events to get to this point. It took a lot of assessing and accepting the rules and the roles and the terms and the conditions inside of my contract. It wasn't just, I just woke up one day and I was like this. No. Because that's what we usually look for when we're looking for the result. So we don't have to do the work. That's why you keep creating those emotional points. So you don't have to do the work. That's why when you're looking at somebody, that's why you're given the two sides of a person, the two sides of the duality of a person. This person got this great life going on, but right behind it is a whole bunch of bullshit. It's to let you know that that bullshit created that aspect of their life. In order for their life to continue being that greatness that you seeing, that bullshit got to go unanswered. So imagine if I deal with the bullshit first. Imagine if I really sit here in real time, start assessing this bullshit. All that stuff that I keep trying to avoid. If I start dealing with this in real time, my life is going to change forever. I had to let go of the expectancy or the fear of the change because I had a big ass fear of change. If I do this or if I say this, if I say this, then I'm going to understand it, then this isn't going to be there anymore. Usually for some physical fucking reason. This is facing yourself. This is looking into, you're not looking for an annulment. I always say, like, you're not looking for a fucking annulment. You're not looking to divorce yourself from anything. That divorce, the divorce in that business sense is like you place fault or infidelity on another party. That's why the divorce came into play. The annulment is like you trying to erase anything that happened. That's what we're in a state. When you're integrating with your shadow, you are in a state of dissolution. Dissolution is the act of separating myself from the state of being by acknowledging that state of being or that energy or that emotional point. That way it's not about me not needing the emotion anymore. It's understanding when that emotion is stimulated, what is it showing me? It's not going bankrupt and restarting some shit. It's you literally are going to be sitting here. When we sit in sessions, we are assessing those aspects. Sit in the consultation, we're assessing those aspects. In the reading, we're assessing those aspects. Every service that I provide up to the shadow work consultation is a mini consultation. When we go into the sessions of the therapy sessions, whether it be they go all the way in depth, we purging and going through, we got some deep shit to go into, or whether it's that top, you've assessed some things and now we just bringing some things into order, whichever service that you go into, that's what we learn it. Bringing everything to the surface. It's not just about bringing what you think that you need to bring to the surface to get better inside of that space. When we do that all the time, when it's like opening up multiple businesses and every time it doesn't work, you close down the business. Man, I ain't getting the results I want from that business, so I'm going to walk away. All right, cool. You walked away from that. Okay. It's out of business. But what did you learn from that business? What did you learn from that aspect of that relationship? What did you learn? Not what did you want to keep? What did you learn? When we fail to assess the relationships, the friendship, when we fail to assess these things, it keeps you in that constant state of taking from that nigga that job, that person, and that, you start trying to bring those, you start looking for the best parts in the external sense and bringing them into your space. So now you had that nigga that was in your life that took you on trips and gave you everything that you wanted. Uh-huh. That's the basic point of walking away. If I walk away from something, it's not based on avoidance, it's based on I've learned everything that I needed to learn. I honestly know that I've learned what I needed to learn from that space. There's nothing else I can learn from that space, but I'm also accepting that if this lesson repeats itself, it's going to be in another space. I'm not going to hold myself in a space to where the frequency of me learning inside of that space is detrimental to my growth. Because this is how you become smaller, staying in these spaces. Because I wasn't learning something. So in every space that I would now go frequent into to replace something in that space, it has kept me acting in those behaviors because I didn't learn the behavior. I didn't learn my patterns. I didn't learn my habits. I did not learn anything. I learned that I was hurt. I learned that my hurt was making me hurt people. I learned that my hurt was making me hindering to be crutches for people. I learned those things, or I saw those, but I didn't learn the why. So in me walking away, now I know I need to take this time to learn the why. Where did it come from? How do we know when we have learned everything we need to learn? At that point, are we judging ourselves? Two keys. On the macro, on the major scale, you never learn everything. On the minor scale, in these mini experiences, every experience has a certain point where you can learn everything into that space. So I can learn I'll use an example. I'll use my last job as an example. My last job was a sequence of events of every job lasted about 5 years. The lessons that I needed to learn at my job were literally rooted into the space. My last sequence of that job, when I learned everything I needed to learn, it was based on me applying what I learned. So use the example of like at my job, I worked at a restaurant. So like I would get to the management point, managing schedules. So I'm learning how to schedule time. In that example, I'm learning how to put my strengths in my strong points and look at my weak points and learn how to work with my weak points. All of these aspects are the things that I needed to learn inside of that space. Last year, the COVID shit happened. I was up to a point where I was very, very emotional. Peace. Mm-hmm. So now I'm sitting in this space. Yeah. So when you sitting in that space, like I literally did not feel guilt. Exactly as my sister just said. I literally could walk away from that space. I didn't feel guilt. I was grateful for everything that I learned into that space. I was like, okay, cool. I learned everything that I could learn inside of this space. So when my boss hit me up, like the COVID shit happened, I worked like 1 or 2 more weeks and then I was like, all right, cool. For the first time, I was grateful and at peace. I was in a state of peace because instead of me wanting to fill the space with things that would help me escape the to escape this sequence of events. To escape this sequence of events, I literally had something to put in every space. So, for example, breaking down the example further, me with my old job, like I would go there early and I would leave late or whatever. So I had something to do. When I could not go to, we weren't working for 30 days, I had a whole 30 days, no work. Now I had to learn to apply. I was learning to apply in my new position. I knew that I already could wake up early, but it wasn't about, oh shit, now that I'm off of work, now that I ain't got no job, I can sleep late. That wasn't a part of me anymore. That was a part of me escaping. Me now in my space is like, well, I'm waking up early. What am I going to put in this space? What have I been doing up to this point? What lesson did I learn? So I'm looking at my job and I'm like, oh, I learned how to do a schedule. This is the day I would do my schedule. This is the day I would do the schedule, do a truck order. How does that memory or that lesson, how do I extract that lesson from that memory? Oh, I said I needed to launch the website. I needed to do this. I needed to put this together. All right, cool. So today will be the day that I work on my schedule. Nothing else. I'll work on my schedule today. Now I'm learning and applying. So by the time that cycle came back around for them to call me to come back and my GM called me to come back, I literally filled my space with things that were based upon me and not based upon something else, based on escape. I was really in my position. I truly learned everything that I needed to learn from there in that space. That's the same thing with relationships. That's the same thing with the friendships. It's all in the aspect of a contract. You opened up that contract. The people that come into your space are based on the contract. What did you learn? What did you learn about yourself? It's not as much as you learned about them, because that's the simple shit. I learned that nigga didn't wash his ass. I learned that she didn't cook. I learned that she didn't do this. And I learned that he didn't do that. That's simple surface level bullshit that'll keep you reacting in comfort. Is what did you learn from this motherfucker not doing this? That my basic necessity of me needing to have this space to be, my space to be organized and to be a certain way, that has everything to do with my emotional aspects. It's not based on expectancy. If someone comes into my space, like I tell everybody, when you come into this space, whether you're getting a reading or a service, the way that my space is set up, if there's a trigger that need to be triggered, it will be triggered. If you are whatever you naturally are at that point in time, comes up into that space. I remember the first time like organizing and creating the space. And I used to know, I was like, nigga, every time I started doing certain things that were based on me and the true aspects of learning myself, certain shit that didn't start coming around anymore. I got to the point to where certain shit don't come up anymore. Certain people don't come around. Certain people don't ask me questions. Certain people don't talk to me. And that guilt wound would come up, or the acceptance or rejection. And that first layer would be, hey, motherfuckers looking at me saying some shit to me like, hey, old buddy was talking about you, or I saw your ex and I saw this and I saw this person. I'm like, every time they came into my space, they told me shit like that. Now they don't come into my space because I've dealt with it. Why do they keep repeating them? Why does this keep repeating? Oh, I got to get to the point of acceptance with myself in truth and speaking that point to people. I remember at my job, for example, going back to the job, I remember for like damn near 4 or 5 months straight, motherfuckers that were coming into my job, they used to work with me at other places. They would tell me about my ex. I'd be like, that's nice. They would tell me some people would tell me some shit that was based in negative to try to get a reaction out of me, but like, yeah, to see if I was gonna say some revenge type shit, like, yeah, that bitch got fat or some dumb shit. And then other motherfuckers be like, yo, y'all thought y'all were like the best, y'all were like the example of the best relationship. Either way, I was like, okay, I'm glad that we were that for y'all, but there were things that I needed to deal with as well as she needed to deal with to go further. And we got to a point where that didn't work anymore. That way of acting, that reacting wasn't working anymore. Oh, damn, that's crazy. Man, well, I saw her. They didn't have anything. It got to a point to where they couldn't say things until it came to a point of projection. Like, damn, that's crazy. Da 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 da. And like they were always trying to find a common point with me. I'm like, okay, that's nice. That's until eventually those aspects, along with other components, made those things move out of my space. That's what you're ultimately doing. If it still shows up, it's still stuff that you have to deal with. Easiest way to understand your lesson. If it still pop up, if it's still coming to your space, if it's still coming to your vortex, there's time. It's initiating your next test. It's initiating the valid aspect of you versus you being valid with yourself rather than you being in a space and you're like saying, I don't go over here because of this, that, and that. I have to get to a point with myself where it's like, I don't go there. I'm getting to a point where I don't have to say that. That's peace. I know what to say, but I don't have to say it. I have the gun loaded, but I don't have to shoot it. I got my sword, I got my blades ready, but I ain't got to use them. That's your peace. I ain't got to. Why? I'm not looking for a reason to use the gun. I'm not looking for a reason to use the weapon. Everything comes in my space as it needs to come in there. I'm with the flow. If I go down my Facebook page right now, I can guarantee there'll be a post to where I can, this is the reading with the spirit. The spirit be like, you should say something. Okay. Even to that point, when you're in your peace, you don't live it. You go from that duality, you're stepping out of duality into you being whole. The fragments of your duality into you being whole. That's the 5D. That's the 5D aspect. The 5D is not based on duality. If you're still looking at this versus this, that versus that, if you're still reacting to that, you're still within that 4D space. You're still within that 3D and 4D. 5D is in the aspect of you being whole. You will be shredded. You will be torn apart if you go in there half-assed. When you're in this 5D space, you're whole. That balance is, you're assessing, you're learning the aspects of maintaining in that balance. So everything you create will create balance. Ultimately, everything you create creates balance. But down here, it'll look like it's destructive as hell. Everything that I do creates balance. But first, you got to fuck your ass up first. You got to release from the attachment. That was one of the hardest things for me was letting go. Like, one of the hardest things that's going to happen is those attachments because of what they're rooted in. That wound, those wounds that they're rooted in. And if you're not coming into a space to where you can get that assessment or get that lesson, because you're still stuck in that old paradigm of motherfuckers, the light answer or the super light answer or the super dark answer of a motherfucker telling you that, hey, everything, you don't need nobody to tell you shit and everything's within you and you don't need nobody. All you got to do is read it with the spirit and all that. You got to be honest with yourself. If that's not you and you need that, you don't know how to create that space, seek motherfuckers that know how to really build that space. Allow your heart. That's how you allowing your heart to lead you to that. Instead of you sitting there like, man, I'm gonna deal with it myself, because all you're doing is keeping that reaction going. You're still keeping that I'm independent. I don't need nobody. Fuck everybody. You're still keeping that shit present because of your fear of going out into the space of being vulnerable, because of your fear of going out into the space and you being honest, you being truly truthful with yourself. You out there trying to pick fights and shit. Let me go get this motherfucker to get mad. Let me go make this motherfucker upset. Because they're only going to reflect how you feel in your truth of yourself. You gotta let go of that control. When I break down that this shit changes the whole mentality and the complex of you. It changes everything. It's supposed to. It changes you onto a level to where you ain't got to put it on the surface. It naturally comes to the surface. If it's not changing you, what comes to the surface, you'll try to keep connected to you. That's how you know you're not really doing. That's how you know you're still stuck within that duality aspect of trying to become something before you are it. You out here trying to you're trying to do one of the examples I use. You out here trying to do some love and hip hop type shit or some movie type shit to where you acquire all the attributes, but you ain't doing none of the internal work. So none of that shit work. Like when you look at the story of King Arthur, you look at the story of King Arthur as an example. It's like, nigga, it wasn't the sword, it was that nigga. That sword did not work unless that nigga was at that level to use that sword. In the beginning, hell yeah, you might be able to do a few things because that power is new, so it's assessing the space. But until you matching that frequency, after a while, the shit starts to dissipate because you were wielding it based in your emotion. We got to stop wielding shit based on our emotions. You got to stop going through the space of seeing shit through the emotional aspect. It hurt my feelings. Why? It hurt my feelings. Why? Why did it bother you? Why does it bother you that they said that? Because it makes me feel like I'm not loved. What is the root? Let's find the root to that. Not, oh yeah, you got to understand, niggas out here don't be really loving us, and they don't love us. They don't understand how to love us. And you go blame it on their mothers, and you go blame it on their fathers and shit. You go blame it on all these other, you blame it on their fathers and their mothers and all that bullshit. Like, that's easy. It's easy for me to go blame it's easy for me to go blame some shit on somebody. Your mama didn't raise you, or your daddy didn't raise you. But now I have to look at myself and be like, why do I keep attracting that? How was I raised? That's the result of how I was raised. That's why I connect to it. That's why I attach to it. That's the results of how I was raised. If I assess how I was raised, then that changes. It changes. It literally will change. Because I'm not thinking about maintaining anything anymore. The conditions of me maintaining it. But I'm going to lose my job and I'm going to lose all this shit. I remember earlier on, like every consultation I would do, like brothers, people that I knew, they'd be like, yo, so this is all you do? I said, yep, this is all that I do. Yo, so how did it feel when you really said, fuck your job? I didn't say fuck my job. I said thank you to my job. I said thank you to everybody that was in that space. Because without them being there and them not being present, I can have the experiences that I needed to have in order to learn the lessons that I needed to learn. You got to get past that point of saying fuck shit to a certain point, to a certain degree, because you can say that based in avoidance. It's like, use this example. At a certain point in time, with yourself, you got to stop saying fuck Jesus. That's the white man's creation. Because you're speaking a contradiction to yourself. You're speaking a whole contradiction to yourself. Because if you're the original, that means you are the original thought that created everything else. I'm denying myself access to a certain level of power. So for me, as the example of me saying fuck Jesus, I had to get to the point with myself and being like, the only reason I'm saying fuck Jesus is because everything that it represented in my life, all of the things that happened to me in my life were ended or began within Jesus' name. So it really wasn't fuck Jesus. It was fuck my mom. It was fuck my pops. It was fuck my family. It was fuck all these things. Fuck my job. Fuck the way my life was acting. All, and I put it all nice and neatly under a bow of fuck Jesus. So on the other end, now I'm trying to build over here. The same conditions exist. Because every time I didn't like it, I could still use that shadow based on necessity in this space. I always had to have an antagonist in this space. Uh-huh. So now when I see, so now it goes back. That's the further point. It's like everything that you're doing between here and then, it's easy for me to say or pick a point and be like, ever since they introduced Jesus, it's been like this. No, it was like that beforehand. That's just the point that you chose to say that's when this happened, all of this happened. But what else happened? Because now this is when we start picking, this is that picking and choosing on that bias point. So anything that matches this or a bit, now everybody has a choice to choose whatever they go and choose to make their life what they want it to be. If I go look in that right now, it's like, use an example. I got the book of Psalms, the spell book, the book of Psalms. All the Psalms are in there. They're all spells. I can't deny this book. If the whole book's a lie, then that means the book of Psalms, this book of spells that I own, is a lie too. I can't pick and choose. I take what I need, leave the rest there. Later on, that don't mean I'm not throwing it away, because later on I know I'm gonna go right back. Oh shit, I know what that means now. I have more understanding. So now when I come back, you'll know when you're looking at certain things, because when you go back to it, you like, oh, okay. I can accept that. Instead of me like, nah, still fuck it. I can accept that, but I ain't got to partake of it. Mm-hmm. Based on that emotional aspect, yeah. if I remove certain aspects from yourself and take you away from your emotions, and you don't know what emotions are, then I can control your emotions. Mm-hmm. The key is what naturally needs to be, what naturally is going to be kicked out will naturally be kicked out. You ain't even got to worry about it. For me, I'm at a point right now where it's like, you have to get to that point first where you're taking everything in, regardless of whether it's true. Bobby Hemmett talked about that. Whether it's true or not, whatever, you got to allow yourself to absorb everything in. And that's what triggers the shit out of you. That's what's triggering the shit out of you. You allowing everything to come in. You're allowing everything to come in and hit where it needs to hit. That's that ultimate trigger, that wave of those triggers. This shit's killing me. This shit's hurting my feelings. This shit made me feel bad. This is why my mom did this. And that's why and you go through this whole entire link with your like, oh my, why? Why? Because then you go through the whole aspect. You looking at because I give an example. Me looking at it from the space now where I'm at now with myself, as opposed to looking at why my mom does certain things, I can't keep using the same excuse to stay in the same mindset based on it's because it's Jesus' fault. It's Jesus' fault. And it's the white man that made Jesus for my mother, and my mother acted the way that she acted. Because just like I have a choice, as above, so below, as within, as without, my mother has a choice. I'm accepting of my choice. Whether my mother's aware of it or not, she has to be accepted. They get to a level of being accepting of their choice. That's the battle of outside of yourself with that conflict. If I'm in conflict based on making choices that are to better and to take me to that level of growth, then of course outside of me, I will always see the distortions or the rejections of that said growth. I'm no longer in a space where I'm rejecting growth. Going through this healing process. Yeah, exactly. Now I'm in that space. I'm like, oh, I'm not looking at it the same way. So, oh, shit. Now I'm like, man, I'm not, oh. Why don't I feel no way anyway? I don't feel no type of way anymore. Because I'm not looking for anything. I'm seeing it for what it is. I'm looking at it for what it is. It's doing exactly what it needs to be doing. If it wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing, then it wouldn't be doing it. I have to look at it without the bias. I got to look at it from a point where I'm not looking at it in bias. I can't put myself in a mindset to keep getting triggered by saying, because women are this and all these old definitions. All these definitions that was put onto that space to maintain somebody's identity, to maintain somebody's perception, to preserve a certain way of life. I had to let that shit go. I had to let those biases go. I had to let the cognitive bias go so I could actually allow myself into the space. That's you. This is you learning. This is you learning yourself. There's steps before you integrating with your shadow. Because if there's still impurity, we'll call it impurities in this case. If there's still impurities with it present within my darkness, when I integrate with it, I integrate with those impurities. This is when you think about niggas going from love and light to peace and dark. Motherfuckers have integrated with the shadow, but there's still impurities within inside of their shadow because they did not take the steps. For whatever reason, you didn't take the steps because you was trying to rush a process. You used the external. You look from the outside in and not the inside out. You want to say, ooh, it's like losing weight from the outside in. It's like losing weight from the outside in. 1 second. It's like literally losing weight from the outside in instead of from the inside out. If I'm losing something from the outside in and I'm looking at it from an external standpoint, that means everything that goes into my space that can be a distraction, like the way I used to eat, how I used to eat, I'm still not understanding it. I'm just simply removing it. Like, so it's like, I know I need to lose weight, so I'm gonna stop eating at this place. I'm gonna stop doing this. I'm gonna stop eating this. I'm gonna shut that off. I'm not gonna go over here and eat this food. But if I don't understand from the inside, when I'm looking from the inside out, I'm looking at what emotions are connected to that food, what's nourishing me inside of my space. I'm looking at what's nourishing those emotional aspects. I only go over there and eat over there. When I used to eat over there, Taco fucking Tuesday and whatever Wednesday and whatever day it was, I used to go over there whenever I was going through this. Every time I went over there, why did I go over there? What was the environment like? Who went with me? All of those things go into question. So now I'm looking at, oh, these emotions fed that space. So if I start dealing with these emotions, that space no longer, it exists, I'm aware of it, but I don't need it the same way that I need it. I talked about that like earlier on in lectures. I was like, from where I'm sitting right now, there's a McDonald's on the corner. I don't eat McDonald's anymore. It was crazy hard at first. I'll be like, yo, McDonald's got the cheapest meals and everything of that nature, feeding the lower levels of myself based on survival. But when I assess in this context, when I assess the aspects of what led me to McDonald's, the emotional aspects, the memories, the thoughts of what McDonald's meant to me when I was little, and I could get a Happy Meal and all of these things. When I started assessing what I viewed as made me happy, when I assess those aspects, happiness based on control, love based on ownership or giving me something, things of that nature, all these correspondences, McDonald's started to fade away. Mm-hmm. That's that space of no self. That's that point of no self. That realm of no self is no joke. That realm of no self, it puts you in that realm of no self. You see nothing. You see nothing. You know you in this space with yourself, and all you see is darkness. And the only things that are inside of that space, the only thing inside of that space is anything that you put inside of that space. That's the levels of those voids. I remember going through the cycles of going through these voids, and I remember like at first there'd be like pictures on the wall inside of the space when I would go through the meditation or the cycle. I see like pictures on the wall. Other times I see like my childhood bike over there in the corner, and I find myself trying to run towards it. Or I'd see like a field over here. I remember there was this field from my childhood. I remember trying to run towards it. I never could get to it. I remember like seeing like even people's faces. This is where I started seeing the deities that I work with and the deities that I've integrated with. The prince, all these different, I started seeing all these different things. And I remember always trying to run towards them. But then one time I was sitting there and I was like, something told me, the same voice was always telling me not just sit the fuck still, sit down, don't move. Until I literally listened to that voice. For the realm of no self, the void, the no self, the no self, the void. One of the most psych terms would be the realm, One of the best ways to explain it in like a term would be like the space where your inner child always sitting at. Sitting in that, I remember sitting in that space. I remember sitting in this space and it was just dark. Peace, peace, peace. I remember sitting in that space and it was just dark. I'm just sitting there. But this was like one of the first times, because I did it a few times. I'm sitting in this space in the darkness, and I noticed that every other time that I went into this space, my eyes were open. When I would go into the space, my eyes were open. So, of course, if my eyes are open, that means everything that I'm going to see is something that I'm needing to see. This time, I closed my eyes and I literally saw nothing. I saw nothing. Literally, I matched the space. The longer that I'm sitting in this space, I think I was sitting there for it felt like hours, but I think it was like 15, 20 minutes. So I was suspending outside of time. So I'm sitting there for 15 minutes. I'm sitting there with my eyes closed. And I'm just allowing my mind to like just organize, sit with itself. And I'm seeing then I start seeing rings. I start seeing shapes. I start seeing I start seeing vegetation. I start smelling, different smells start coming up. And then something says, open my eyes while I'm inside the space. Don't worry, you always can play it back. So I'm sitting inside this space and I'm like, wait. The first time I opened my eyes in that space, I saw myself when I was 2. I saw my 2-year-old self. First time I went into that space, I saw my 2-year-old self. I could smell the grass. I could smell the grass. I knew how the grass felt. I saw everything. And I'm like looking at myself through my eyes of my 2-year-old self. I remember feeling happy. I remember feeling truly happy. I remember truly being at peace. I remember those feelings that I thought that I had lost and I was searching outside of myself for. Kept going through these cycles, kept going through these meditations with myself, going through these cycles of these meditations. And every time that I would go in there, now I had more of a sense of what I was looking for. So I'm looking for peace and I'm seeing the things that are against peace inside the void, inside my void. So like, if I'm thinking about peace, the correspondence would be anything that's not based on peace. So now inside the space, I'm starting to see things distort inside of my space. So like what I used to view as being something very peaceful, it would shift, it would switch. It wouldn't be what it was. It would like literally for me, and everybody has a different experience when we go through this. Like now I'm seeing myself as different. I'm seeing like different versions of myself. And I'm like seeing people. I'm literally like seeing the people that were in my life at that point in time. I'm seeing them as me wearing a mask that is me. So like I'm just taking a walk. I'm like, hey, what's your name? Hey. But it's like they're literally going like this. And like every time they lift their mask, when I introduce myself to them, they lift the mask and I see me. But I'm like, wait, you're not, wait, you're not, who the fuck are you? Until I got to the point when I went through this same cycle of events, they lift the mask, then I'm not seeing shit. Then I'm lifting the mask and then I'm seeing a mirror. Then I'm lifting the mask, I'm always seeing something different. I was removing layers in that real time. How that reflected in my physical life, how that reflected in the physical realm when I would come back to this space is seeing that same person in real life. And it's like now the conversation became different because now it's based on assessment. Now I'm like, oh shit, like nobody is who I thought. Nobody is, it wasn't like nobody was what I created them to be. Nobody was what they thought they were. They were what I created them to be. Everybody in my space was not what I wanted, what I thought they were. And I had to push myself past that point. They were created to be what I needed them to be. I created the space for them to come in. This is that, like, I created that space for them to come in. I didn't look at them like, hey, no. I had to go past that point. This is when you're looking into your physical realm and you're looking at people now, and you're looking at people and how they're reacting to you. You irritated. They don't be affected by shit. They're teaching you something about yourself. They're teaching you a level to yourself. I remember motherfuckers like, with literally, I remember, yeah, you doing all that. You trying to maintain I was trying to maintain that identity. Because I now had to ask the question to myself, what my identity was I trying to maintain? Was I still trying to be the go-to in everybody's situation? Was me trying to be the go-to to everybody was an equivalent to me not being there for my mother like I thought I should have during arguments with her and between her and my pops. Me sitting there not being able to do anything. Me being frozen in a space to where I didn't know how to move. That built up this emotional catalyst in my life or development to now in every space where somebody being done dirty or done wrong. I don't care if it was their fault or not. I don't care. I didn't see no fault. I'm trying to be this selfless individual and I'm trying to save their life. I'm trying to make them better. You can come stay with me. You need to ride with me. Come ride with me and all this shit. But not realizing that as long as I was acting on that emotional aspect, then of course they needed to stay that way. So them never getting a job, them never getting a life, them not getting themselves in order, them not organizing aspects of themselves, it was simply just like me. I was avoiding organizing my life. I was avoiding dealing with things that I needed to deal with. I was just using them as a crutch. As much as you need two crutches to walk in a balance. So as much as I was their crutch, they were a crutch to me. What did we create? An identity. But after I removed everything, what the fuck are we? That identity keeps you in ownership. Trying to maintain that identity keeps you in ownership. You trying to be, I'm the most independent motherfucker on the planet. Fuck everybody. Ownership. Now I can go back to my first, like when I thought about, like earlier when we opened up, I was talking about my first car. My first car was a projection based on my identity. On both ends of the spectrum, you're maintaining while you're stuck in this duality trying to find that balance. There's your identity that you create based on the necessity to feed your shadow, as long as you're separated. So on both ends of this spectrum, this when we talk about it, whenever you read about polarities and you being stuck in the polarities of going back and forth and coming to this middle point, this is bringing your shadow into the now. This is bringing your shadow into the now. Bringing those aspects of yourself into the now. That way you're not, because on this side right here is your shadow. Right here is what's feeding your shadow. And on this other end is your emotions. Right here's your emotions. So you're never ahead of your, so let me do it like this so we can see it like this. Here's your shadow. Here's the necessities that are feeding your shadow. And here are your emotions. Your emotions, identity, your ego created that whole identity that feeds the necessities of these emotions that feeds the necessities or the untapped or unlearned emotions to keep that shadow living back there. So right here, here's the little boy that was 5 years old that pissed his pants. Here are the emotions that I felt from being rejected from wetting my pants when I was little. The rejection, the abandonment, the guilt. Greetings. So now in this space right here, here is the identity that I created to say that no one's ever going to say anything about me wetting my pants, ultimately wetting my pants. So now I'm separated. There's 3 tiers of me. You look at the Kabbalah of the Tree of Life, the 3 different pillars. You look at the G.O.D pillar, all same aspects. So now you're looking like, oh, I got to go deal with me wetting my pants and how I felt when I was 5 years old. I got to go apologize to him. I got to go have an apology and a conversation with little Carlos. Yo, Carlos, you were little. You got excited. I got to tell him the truth. Like, you got excited. We get excited. We didn't have control. But guess what? I got control now. What I know now my inner child literally can come from that past moment into the present. Now my inner child is here. Now instead of my inner child creating based on necessity to maintain there, my shadow is now here. Now that I'm here with my shadow is now here, now my emotions, now the projection of my light is not pushing an identity. Now that identity must come to the center. Now my ego must come into balance. So now my ego and my shadow are sitting right here. Now I can assess. Now I can read the points. Now I can read the points that correspond between my shadow and the ego and the identity. Now I can bring these joints in. Now I can bring these motherfuckers into integration. Now I can take ownership of this aspect. Now these emotions are now brought to the higher aspect of myself. Now I can gain intelligence. Now I can work within my intelligence. Now I can work within my genius or my Damians or my demons or the prior principles of my thought. Now everything that comes into my space is now coming through this being together, not being separated. Now I'm whole. Now this lesson I can bring to my higher aspects up here instead of me looking at it down here. Instead of me being like, oh, woe is me. My life is not where I want it to be because of this, and this, and that, and that. Necessity feeding the shadow back there. My life, motherfuckers don't accept me, don't like me, and all this shit. And yeah, you're bringing it here. That way you don't need to use the mask that your identity is trying to create. I'm gonna give a killer example. What is a mother without kids? What is a father without children? What is a man without a job? What is a boy without his dog? All the shit that we've been listening to since we were little. You were taught identity. You were taught how to maintain an identity. Separated. That's why when we look at now you can say you reached the level of maturity. You be like, you know what? Okay, cool. Because I'm not reacting the same way. That can't be brought up and used against me. That type of shit can't be brought up and used against me. Yeah, I did it. Yeah, I peed on myself in the 5th grade. Nigga, you peed on yourself. You still pee on yourself now when you get drunk. Because now you at that different space. You moving at a different frequency. Now you're not seeing things through that wound. Because as long as you are separated, the only thing that you can look through is the wound. It's like I don't know who shared that post first on the Facebook, but someone shared the post. It was like, it's funny. I laugh at it now, but it's like the post that says, him, what kind of man do you want in your life? And then the response is, why? So you can beat him for a couple of days and then da-da-da-da. That exempts hurt. I remember saying that shit. Like, a woman would ask me, like, yo, what kind of woman you need in your life? And I would give them these false ass expectations until I got to a point where I would say I don't need anything. I don't need nothing. I don't need you to be anything. I don't need you to be any type of way. I just want you. I'm open. I'm honest. I'm vulnerable. I'm learning my emotional maturity with myself. And if you down for that, you down for that. That's my only intention, is to learn some shit. Imagine just saying that shit in a space, really saying that shit to yourself. Think about the whole thing. Everything's going to change. Literally everything will change. It's like, so you don't need me to cook? Like, I can cook. You don't need me to do? No. Do what you naturally do inside of the space. If it connects, it connects. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Then it move forward. Don't use the external. We got to stop using the external to be the reason to mask our internal. That's what you do when you outside of that external aspect. You keep using the external to mask the internal conflicts. So when that shit comes to the surface, it's going to be fed by that external point. Because that means more to you than anything else. I've walked before, I can walk again. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, now I got to go walk. I've walked before, I can walk again. I've went hungry before, I can go hungry again. But now when I think about being hungry, if there's ever a day where I cannot eat, I guess I'm fasting. Higher aspect, higher perspective. A day that I cannot eat, that I have no food to eat or no money to go eat. Instead of me trying to create an identity, I'm going to go hustle and make me a couple of dollars so I can go give me a burger from Burger King. It's going to be a day that I'm about to fast. Let me sit back and fast for the next couple of hours. I got some water. I'm going to drink water all day. Maybe that's what I need to be doing. That's creation. That's becoming efficient in your manifestations. Because once you didn't master that, now you didn't master the urge to, why do I need to eat all the fucking time? I drink water all fucking day. I didn't go nowhere. I sat down and drank water. How many days can I do that? This is creation. This is integrating with that shadow. Because that little 8-year-old me, that motherfucker ate everything when he was upset. That motherfucker was bought all types of snacks and shit whenever an argument between my mom and pops would pop off, and then I feel some type of way. My pops go get me something, some food. My mom's go get me some snacks, and I'm eating snacks. So now that's the way that I deal with whenever I hear an argument. That's the way I deal with whenever I feel like a conflict. I'm going to go get a bunch of food into my space. What if I can't do it? Reaction. I can't eat. I can't. Why? My inner child came out. That moment when you hungry. That moment when you feeling some type of way sexually with some shit. You horny as fuck. You ain't really horny. That was just the way that you emotionally dumped whenever you decided to space. Like, goddamn, man, maybe I should just go for a run. Or maybe I should just go for a walk. Maybe I should Samuel L. Jackson it. You remember Samuel L. Jackson on the movie 187? When that nigga felt some type of way about the white girl, and that nigga hopped on that old ass exercise bike in his backyard? Maybe I need to go do that. Maybe I need to go for a run then. Maybe I need to go for a walk. Maybe I need to, what? Because the first thing that's going to come up is your rejections and your aspects of rejection, fears, all that shit going to come up first. Man, I need to give me some pussy. Why? What urge? What are you trying to keep covered up that might come to the surface? Can you tell yourself a whole damn conversation? Man, I need to go get laid, but no, these chicks out here, they're gonna manipulate me, try to take my money and do all this other shit. They're gonna want to go eat and all this other stuff. They're gonna want me to do some stuff for them. That's the world you created. That's the world you created in order to operate at that level, in that identity. Let me slide back real quick and think about myself real quick. What did that really mean? That's how I connect to people, because that's what I saw in my childhood or in my past life. That's how I was getting things in my past life. My second life down here, nigga, I had a whole fucking harem. Nigga, I was a pimp, and I was basically a fucking pimp in my second life. The reason why, because I reacted to it whenever my pops and my father and his brother, my father and my uncle, my pops was like, I remember my uncle said to me, he was like, so you going to school for business and psychology? I was like, yeah. He was like, you about to become a legal pimp. You about to go study the mind and numbers and money? You a legal pimp. I reacted. I was like, what? I laughed, but I was like, wait, I've heard that before. I've done that before. That's what my uncle represented. I had to go past the point of motherfucking be like pimping his bad, and my dad, my pops, because my pops worked at a brothel type shit. My uncle did the same fucking shit. Why is this prevalent in my life? Why am I seeing this? This is disgusting to me. Nigga, I've done it before. That's why it's present. It's corresponding to you. It ain't coming to you it ain't coming to you just because. It's coming to you because it's a part of you. That is a part of you that it's time for you to assess and accept. Down to the manipulations. We've all used a form of emotional manipulation in our lives. We've all done it. That's something that you got to accept, that you used emotional manipulation in your life. From the first time let's use a lightweight thing. From the first time that you held your breath or screamed and shouted to get a cookie when you were little, all the way up to the time to where you were emotionally manipulated and you lost your first realms, you lost the first aspects of your innocence. Mm-hmm. To the first time you lost your childlike innocence. And now you've been in a battle this entire time trying to find your innocence. Trying to prove that you can be innocent. You're trying to prove your childlike innocence. You can get your childlike innocence back. Whether it was you hung out with young kids, you hung out with the younger kids, and you was always trying to go to the club with the younger people, all the way to your relationships. You wondering why all the niggas that you ever dated, all the chicks that you ever dated, they all act childish as fuck. They're reflections of the perspective of the last innocence that you lost. It ain't about them as much as it is about you. They acting like a child. How was your childhood? Remember, you still activated. You still active from that separation from your shadow of your childhood. The shadow of how your father raised you, the shadow of how your mom raised you, the shadow of how you were raised in an overall sense. That's what you acting out inside of your space. So you got to really think about it. Why does every nigga that you get with seem to be real fucking childish? Why does every chick that you get with seem to be real fucking childish? Hell, why when you get into spaces, motherfuckers keep calling you childish? I ain't childish. I ain't gonna be putting up with bullshit. Nigga, you childish. You get to a certain point to where you stop, you're gonna remove those fucking filters that you keep trying to make seem better than they were. I remember going around, but like I would literally be in a state, you being in a state of 1 second. Remember, you're getting to a point with yourself. You're coming to a point to where you don't have to actively seek doing it. But that means you have to learn it first. You have to learn the beginning, the middle, and the end of how it works. I remember being very vengeful. I remember being mad fucking, you did it, so I'm going to do it. Or I did all of this bullshit. I did all this for us and you and all of this. And now that you don't appreciate it, fine, I'm going to do it for myself. But it was coming from a point of me trying to still look back at my mom, look back at earlier parts of my life, earlier parts of my cycles. That's all I was feeding that shadow back there. So I had to stay in that stream of being bitter. I had to stay in that stream of being petty niggas. I had to stay in that stream of trying to control people based on that ownership narrative. I had to stay in that stream. And as long as I could stay in that stream, I could stay in that space. So that line in my contract never got voided out. Here's the crazy part about your contract. I can guarantee you, in a mini aspect, you've had at least 10 opportunities to void out something in your contract for this cycle. You've had at least 10 abilities to void something out of your contract. What stopped you? Shame, guilt, doubt, insecurity. Something stopped you from making that decision because you didn't know what to do with. If you make that such a decision, what you gonna do with the energy that you unlock? What are you gonna do with the energy that you unlock from that space? If everybody in your family is fucking fat as shit on one side or broke as shit on the other side or whatever it may be, what would it look like if you said, I'm no longer going to be fat. I'm not going to be broke. I'm not going to live in a poverty-stricken mindset. You wouldn't know what to do with it yet. That's avoiding the contract. Let me take that out. Let me assess this. You don't know what it looked like. That fear is a heavy-ass fucking narrative to that shit. You don't know what that looked like. Because the only memories that you have based in that space, use an example, my pop side, well off in that space, never came down here and never intervened, never came into the space. My father's side, motherfuckers, that was the streets. We were mafia mentality in that space, the family type shit. My mom's side, literally every one of my aunts had kids before they turned like 15 and 16 years old. Baby fathers, all that shit. That was the narrative. That was the whole damn narrative. That was the narrative in which I came from. I had to make the decisions. I had to make that decision and not feel the shame, not feel the guilt, or allow myself to feel the shame and feel the guilt and feel the ridicule and feel all of that shit. Because now, since I'm feeling it, since I'm going through it, since I'm facing it, I can see it for what it really is on the other side. All of them got all of this, and they say that they're happy. I remember the last time I saw one of my aunts, all of my aunts look bad. All of my aunts look bad. They all look, and that's just me from a spiritual perspective. I can see all of the dead spiritual weight on their faces. I can see all of the dead. I can see all of that dead on their fucking faces. I can see they look dead in their fucking face. I can see this shit from the spiritual narrative. That shit, I'm like, ugh. Looking at my cousins and family members and cousins, that I can see that shit on their fucking face. I can see that on their fucking body. I can see that weight. I can see what they've contracted onto them. I can see that shit. I'm like, ugh. Shit look horrible. But they're still living that same way. They're still doing that same shit. I literally stopped the clock at the 27 mark. Even though I'm 36 now, but I stopped it at the 27 mark. Because I'm not holding in the emotion. I'm not stuck within the aspects of time. I'm not looking at it like I gotta be at this age to get this much, and I gotta do this. I'm not looking at it that way anymore. That's the assessment of your contract. When we start assessing the contract, you're like, oh, now it makes sense. Now I can shed that shit off. You can do whatever you want on the physical, but if you ain't doing it internally, you ain't really doing it. It's just going to show back up. I'm stressed out. All right, cool. Let me go relieve my stress. All right, cool. Now guess what you created? The nexus point. Now, in order for you to relieve stress, you got to be in order for you to relieve the implements of stress, you got to, in order for you to relieve it, you got to have that conduit to still be present. Separation of your shadow. As long as your shadow back here, the necessity to feed the urge, or the urge, the need, the want, the preservation will always be present. That's why true love is a destructive force. Force you to do things you ain't never wanted to do a day in your damn life, but it'll make you better. Love destroys things before it builds anything. Love destroys shit before it builds anything. Hate is what keeps things together down here. Fear is what keeps things together down here. When I learned that just changed everything for me. Because I realized that's how I was feeding myself. I fed everything through hate, the fear narrative, which is hate, which is anger, which is sorrow, which is despair, which is desperation, which is guilt, which is lack of apathy, which is grief, based in hate. I don't even grieve the damn same. My grief is in a level of peace, is a level of shedding. My grief is in a level of shedding. That means if it comes into my space, I'm supposed to be grieving about it. I even grieve differently. My grief is a celebration of shedding. But that contract, you got to assess everything. It's going to put you in a position where you're like, man, but nah, if I do this, then other people ain't going to look at me the same. Who sent me that? As I'm reading through, thank you, Calvin. Thank you, Calvin, for the, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. If you're still in the room. But your aptitude for yourself to become the better aspect of yourself is, remember, as we said last week, Your perception, your projections, and your preservation are in the light. Your purpose, your potential, your potential, and your perspective are in the darkness. Your humility is in the darkness. Your integrity's in the darkness. Think about it. Every time you went through a dark time in your life, you did some shit that went against the original. You went against some shit that went against the integrity or the morals that you set out based on how you were, just to keep yourself preserved into that space. That's in the darkness. My humility is not in the light. It's shown in the light based on what I've dealt with in my darkness. My integrity is on point. My intuition is on point because of what I learned based on my potential in shifting my perspective and understanding the aspects of my darkness and acceptance. Not in avoidance, not in neglecting it. Had to change all that shit up. From inside out, not outside in. This point, I love that the questions flowed. I love that the questions flowed throughout the lecture. It kept that flowing to that point because y'all asked the questions that were leading into the points of the lecture. But yeah, this is our question and answer period. Y'all know how we do the questions and answers. You have any questions? They don't have to be about the topic that we got into. It can be about any question that pops into your head. Bring it up. Let's talk about it. Bring it up and let's talk about it. As always, everything from our services, from readings all the way to consultation. They set up that consultation to see the level of like the recommendation for that therapy session, setting that therapy session, what we need to bring to the surface and assess and learn. All of that's available. Inbox me. You can inbox me. You can drop it in the comments. Hit the number. All of that's in the description of this video. Send that heart real quick. Boom. Thank you for that. Because I desire you to be the fucking best. These are the things that we got to make normal. This is where your energy lies. This is where your magic lies. Your magic is not outside of you. It's all right there. You just got to understand what it is at this level, whatever level you're at. Your level of magic, your level of manifestation, your level of intent, how you set your intentions, all that shit is going to be fed by the unseen. That dream relationship, go look in the mirror. It's your shadow. The job, the things that you desire in this space to bring into this space into fruition is going to be based on dealing with the aspects of your shadow. Whatever intention you set, remember what it sits in. That's the acceptance. That's the acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I want a better life, but it's rooted in my intentions will be only rooted in based on the life that I had. So I only want a better life than the life that I had. So now I'm going to create this false reality for myself based on a life that I had to get a little bit of something. Little bit of something. I want it all. It's not meant to walk away from it or avoid it. You got to deal with it. I'm going to do a collective reading real quick. Do a nice little collective reading. You know, we do the donation-based readings on Fridays. You know, on Wednesdays, we do the live readings on the Facebook page. Perfect card to pull during the full moon. The moon was the first card. If you don't know, whatever you want to call it, the moon or the satellite is in Aquarius. If you didn't know, yes, it affects you based on what the description of the Aquarius is. The Aquarius energy is bringing things to the surface for you to bring yourself and understand to validate everything outside of you is valid. Everything outside of you going on is valid. It's based on your shadow aspects. The changes in your life, the changes and the aptitudes that are going on in your space, the changes and the aptitudes of the changes that are going on in your life in this cycle of your point in time are based on going into the introspective of yourself of like, yo, what do I want to do? What do I want my life to be? What do I need to do to get to it? It's about accepting the valid. It's about accepting everything is valid. Because everything has a valid point. You got to see past your emotion. You can't keep looking at things through the aspect of the emotion of saying, oh, because of this, then I can't do this, or that means this. Stop trying to give meanings based on what we've been getting into this entire lecture based on your emotional intellect. Everything that's triggering you right now is forcing you to surrender the scape or the mindset through emotional intellect. You have a definition in your head. It's time to challenge that definition so you can come into using your intelligence, becoming more self-aware, looking at where you're at, realizing and accepting where you're at, and you have to change aspects of your life in order to get to where you're trying to go. You cannot, as I always say with the aspects of the universe, the creator, higher power, wherever you're at in your journey, you do not get based on what you want to be. You get based on where you are at. You will not receive based on what you're trying to be. You get where you are at. You get based in your truth. So if you have an identity present or a shadow that's been separated, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get the things that feed that shadow. But guess why it's feeding that shadow? You have to change your perspective and be like, wait, I keep feeding this shadow. Let me bring this shadow to the dinner table in front of me instead of looking at it behind me. Let me bring it to the table. What do you like to eat? Why do you like to eat it? Why the fuck do you like that type of shit? That's not what we on anymore. It's time for us to do some work. Second card, in moving forward, the changes in your life. I'm actually explaining. Here's the thing about me reading cards. The cards are the illustration to the energy that I'm reading. The cards are the illustration to the energy that I'm reading. Moving forward, that Knight of Swords. Moving forward. A lot of times when we're coming into the changes into our lives or the frequencies are changing, we move forward and all we have is what we want to keep putting into that space to maintain that charge. Remember what I just said about your shadow. Are you feeding it or is it feeding you? What are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? How are y'all dancing? You keep moving forward, but you're going through that sense. You want to keep putting something there to help you give you this false sense of the false sense of purpose or the false sense of potential based on preserving where you are at. It's time to step out of preserving where you are at, what you have done. Being above water is not cute anymore. Either you're going to walk on the water or you're going to submerge yourself into it. Which one are you going to do? You're definitely not able to stand on top of the water because you still got some shit that you got to assess. It's time to dive. That leads us into the Ten of Pentacles. your expressions, what's grounding you. Is it time to go down, deep below, down in here to go get your crown? What do you keep putting your crown into? What is this achievement that you have inside of this space? What does that mean based on that achievement? That instant gratification. Everybody be like, ooh, you're this now because you got this. What is it? It's time to assess those aspects. As you're moving forward, I just painted that picture. As we're moving forward, what needs to be assessed? What body are you in right now? What mindset are you in right now? Is that mindset worth it? Is it based on your false mind, based on a fraction, based on a fractal point, or is it actually something that's making you more whole? Everything in your space, remember, is giving you that lesson right now. So if you're in a space where you don't feel worthy about something, you don't feel love, why? What is your definition? That definition, it's time to check that definition. Okay, if you're still using the definition based on control, based on ownership, based on an external aspect, based on a predetermined, based on the trauma, trying to prove to yourself, trying to prove to your shadow, that's feeding it even further, it's time to assess that and let that shit go. Which leads into that chariot. Whenever I see the chariot, I think about dust settling. Make the run, make the step, make the jump. Make the jump. Let the dust fly. Let the dust come up. Let that moon dust come up from that moon bout, that jump. Whatever the dust settles on are the things that you have to assess. The thing we get worried about the thing that a lot of times we get worried about when we're moving forward is where the dust is going to settle. The dust is going to show the new lines. The dust is going to show what no longer is prevalent in your life. The dust has to settle. You keep trying to, run. Take the move to go forward. You know you need the separation, take the separation. What lesson are you learning? That goes right back to the lesson. If you just running the run, then it's not doing anything. You're just going to run back to the same bullshit because you're in your comfort zone. If your comfort zone is based on running, guess what you're going to do? In a circle. But if my mindset is to move forward, that means I got to break my comfort zone. So running forward is just the same as having to sit still. Now leads us to that King of Wands. Stand firm in your decision. Whatever decision you make, stand firm in it. Make sure that it is valid to your growth. Stop using external validation to prove your growth. We have to stop depending on the external narrative being the narrative to our growth. I'm growing because my job gave me a raise. What does it represent? I'm growing because, why am I growing? Because I did something external. What does that mean based on my internal? Some of the most deepest aspects of your growth involves losing something before you gain something else. Some of the biggest points of my growth was where it wasn't when I had my job, it's when I lost my damn job. Some of the biggest aspects of my growth wasn't when I got a new place, it's when I was homeless for 2 fucking months. Those are some of the greatest points in my life because it forced me to sit down with myself. I couldn't run. Some of the greatest potentials in my fucking growth, they're not based in preserving, they're based in understanding my perspective. How did I get there in the first place? And then the final card, I always feel like pulling 6. That final card, as you make these decisions moving forward and standing firm in those, the magic of removing the glamour. Every time I see the magician, I think about the glamours. As you going through the changes, what glamours are you removing? The glamours, the identities, the things that gave you a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. You'll notice that I talked about that in the day. As you're integrating with your shadow or the dark night of the soul, you're noticing that right now there are certain things in your space, certain things that the way you used to react to it, the way you used to move through it, the way you used to talk about it, it don't even work no more. The validation that you were seeking from it don't even work no more. The conversation don't even hold the same weight. You keep trying to, I'm going to say it this way, and I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to do it this way. But it keep bringing you back to the same exact point. It keep bringing you back to the same exact space. You only fooling yourself. But if I do it this way, or I say it this way, or if I move this way, or if I act this way, then I'm going to get a different result. These points inside of your comfort zone are the things that you're running into. That middle point still going to remain the same until you understand why I was there in the first place. That middle point will never change. That middle point will never change as long as you're in that realm of that comfort. It's time to step out of that comfort zone. But again, I desire you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be the fucking best. I desire you to embrace yourself. That's what I desire. I am simply the vessel that is in the transition to bring this to you. I'm humbled for that honor, for everything that I do. It's no longer this. The old shit don't work. You done did all that already. It's time to bring it to the present. It's time to acknowledge that shit. It's time to talk to that contract. It's time to deal with that contract. If you're just now coming in, you didn't miss it. It's available for playback. It'll be available for playback in about 15, 20 minutes when it loads itself. But yeah, everything from services, consultation, readings. You ready? Hit me up. We can build. Because I just want to see you be the fucking best. I love you. We love us. Ashe.